Chapter 29-23. He closed the door of the secret chamber and put his son down. He sighed and said, "On one side is the peerless ominous sword, and on the other side is the apocalyptic tribulation fire. The Sacred Sword clan has been too smooth these past few years, and they have forgotten themselves. In the past, the famed Sword Sacred clan had always acted cautiously to ensure that nothing would go wrong. However, in order to refine the absolute heaven sword, he did not hesitate to suppress a trace of human-shaped tribulation fire. He was too confident in the process of forging the absolute heaven sword. During this period, he had pointed out the flaws and shortcomings in the forging process, but the famous Sword Sacred clan did not believe him. In the end, he almost ended up being devoured by the absolute heaven sword. "Father, did you make this?" Ada came to his senses and looked around the secret room in shock. He had grown up in the famed Sword Sacred clan and had seen countless Tao artifacts. However, he had never seen such an exquisite secret room before. Its grade was probably much higher than that of Great Sage Huang and the other great sages of the family. Now that things had come to this, Mo Hung could no longer conceal it. He nodded slightly and said, "Yes." Ada murmured, "So father has been hiding his artifact forging skills all along." A trace of pride appeared on Mo Hung's face and his eyes were filled with anticipation. "I hope my son will be proud of me." However, the response he received was something that Mo Hung did not expect. "Why are you hiding it?" Ada clenched his fist. "If you tell the 5 great sages, they will definitely be shocked by your talent and put you in an important position. You will become the most famous refiner in the Sacred Sword clan, and I will be the son of a refiner. I will not be called the son of a good-for-nothing, nor will I be looked down upon by others, nor will I be ostracized by my clan. Why? Why did you make me suffer so much?" What Mo Hung received was not pride but censure. He felt a stabbing pain in his heart. His son, who had been mentally suppressed since he was young, had a very extreme mentality. He wanted to curry favor with the famed Sword Sacred clan, gain their recognition and attention, and get rid of his lowly status. "Child, I was deceived by the famed Sword Sacred clan all those years ago and was forcefully enslaved. Let me ask you, how could I be willing to serve them?" Mo Hung spoke of his suffering. Back then, he had fallen in love with a female member of the Sword Sacred clan. She had invited him here, saying that she wanted to bring him to meet her father to discuss the marriage. It was only after he arrived that he realized that it was all a scam crafted by the female clansman. As soon as he arrived, he was enslaved and became a tool for the famed Sword Sacred clan to forge artifacts. And he wasn't the only one who had a similar experience. There were also other artificers who had been tricked by the Sword Sacred tribe's female clansmen. However, the special thing was that the female tribesman accidentally gave birth to his child, Ada. Later on, when the female clansman went out to deceive others, she was exposed and killed. Therefore, Mo Hung raised the child alone. Unexpectedly, Ada's mentality was completely distorted by his childhood. "Father, why are you still brooding over the past? Let's let bygones be bygones. What we should do now is demonstrate our worth and fight for the Sacred Sword clan's recognition. Only then will we have a good life," Ada said longingly. "There's still time. Let's contact the 5 great saints and get them to bring our clansmen here to seek refuge. That way we'll owe the Sword Sacred race a debt of gratitude. Once we survive this, we'll become the Sword Sacred race's benefactors." Ada stood up and hobbled towards the door of the secret room. Mo Hung was disappointed. Yes, this was his son. He had been completely nurtured into a loyal and devoted slave by the famed Sword Sacred clan. From the body to the heart, everything was enslaved. "Child, it's already too late," Mo Hung sighed. "Right now, the human-shaped tribulation fire should have returned and was ready to kill in all directions. The famed Sword Sacred clan's clansmen would not be able to escape annihilation. Father, the more dangerous it is, the more valuable our rescue will be. Ada said agitatedly and opened the door of the secret room again. Through the crack, he could see some clansmen fleeing in panic from afar. Many of them were people who had looked down on him before. If they were given a place to hide now, they would definitely not dare to look down on him in the future, right? He opened his mouth and was about to shout when Emohin closed the door of the secret room again. His eyes revealed undisguised disappointment. A person must have a backbone. Not only did he not resent the way the famed Sword Sacred clan treated him and his father, he actually wanted to rescue them and gain their recognition? How lowly must he be to have such a thought? Father, if you want to be a wimp for the rest of your life, that's your business, but I don't want to. Ada pushed Emohin away with a face full of anger. Now is my chance to make a contribution, no one can stop me. Emohin staggered, his heart in pain. Was it not good to watch the famed Sword Sacred clan be destroyed? Why must he be their slave? Then I'll leave this secret room to you. It will be a turning point in your life. The reason why Emohin stayed was because he cared about this flesh and blood of his. However, his performance was too disappointing. He took a step forward and walked out of the secret room. Ada's heart was in a mess. Although his father was a wimp, he had relied on him all these years. He never thought that there would be a day when his father would leave him. Father, are you going to leave me behind? I'm your son. Ada did not dare to leave the secret room and loudly criticized. Emohin sighed. It's true that you are my son, but you are not young anymore. You should have been independent long ago. In the future, take care of yourself. After saying that, his figure flashed, and he displayed his powerful cultivation and immediately left. Ada chased after him, but the sky suddenly turned pitch black. Boundless black flames descended like a heavenly tribulation. Ada was so frightened that he immediately retreated and shouted to the nearby famed Sword Sacred clan clansmen, "Come quickly, there's a secret room here." The famed Sword Sacred clan clansmen, who were busy running for their lives, rushed over when they heard that. In the blink of an eye, over 100 people, all of them core members of the clan, entered the secret room. Just as they dodged in, the black tribulation flames descended from the sky. Ada immediately closed the door. Explosions and screams could be heard outside. One could imagine that the outside had fallen into a sea of flames. However, apart from the temperature rising slightly in this secret room, there was actually nothing wrong with it. An entire day passed. The commotion outside gradually calmed down, and they tried to open a crack in the secret room. Unexpectedly, a wisp of remnant tribulation flames swept in and burned 2 nearby ancient sages to ashes on the spot. This scene gave everyone a fright, and they immediately closed the door. It was not until an entire month later, when the footsteps of animals came from outside, that they opened the door to the secret room. What entered their eyes was a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The huge sword-shaped residence of the famed Sword Sacred clan had already disappeared. All that was left was an incomparably pitch-black circular pit and countless ashes. The former building had already been reduced to ashes. Only a few demonic beasts were left in the ruins, searching for food. "The rest are all dead?" an ancient sage said in a daze. Looking at the scene back then, most of the clansmen had not escaped the range of the tribulation flames. Only 5 great sages had escaped first. The famed Sword Sacred clan had almost been exterminated. Chapter 29-24. Fortunately, the elites of the clan were still alive. With them around, it was only a matter of time before they rebuilt the famed Sword Sacred clan. Well done! As the clan master, the ancient sage patted Ada's shoulder and praised, "Thanks to you, the famed Sword Sacred clan was able to avoid total annihilation. Your contribution cannot go unnoticed." Ada was overjoyed. For so many years, he had been living at the bottom of the famed Sword Sacred clan and was looked down upon by everyone. He did not expect to be praised by the high and mighty clan master today. One had to know that in the past, he could not even meet the clan master. "I'll consider giving you a reward." The clan master's eyes revealed an unfathomable look. Ada immediately knelt down in fear and trepidation. "I'm a member of the famed Sword Sacred clan. Everything I've done is what I should do. I dare not ask for a reward." "You must accept my reward." The clan master's eyes became even more profound. Ada was overjoyed. His decision was indeed correct. Only by providing help in times of need would he be rewarded generously. He lowered his head and said embarrassedly, "This group does not dare to disobey the clan master's orders." The clan master said indifferently. Suddenly, he stretched out his palm and patted Ada's chest. A ball of flames ignited in his palm, immediately burning on Ada's chest. It caused an excruciating pain on his forehead. Ada screamed due to the pain and wanted to break free, but the two young clansmen behind him had ferocious sneers on their faces. They grabbed Ada and pressed him to the ground, allowing the fire to burn his chest. The extremely cruel process lasted for half a cup of tea's time. Ada felt that he had suffered unprecedented torture in his life. The persecution he had suffered in the past was not even a fraction of this. He screamed incessantly. In the end, his limbs twitched in pain. He did not even have the strength to scream. He lay on the ground like a dead pig, panting weakly. A slave mark appeared on his chest. But what was different from a normal slave mark was that it was the same as Mo Heng's. "Haha, did you hear that just now? This bastard actually called himself a member of our famed Sword Sacred clan?" A young member of the famed Sword Sacred clan scornfully stepped on Ada's butt and sneered. "Ha ha, what a surprise. We usually treat him like a beast, but at the critical moment, he actually saved us. Don't you think it's strange? Who asked him to be born from that good-for-nothing Mo Heng? He's probably born with low intelligence. Did you see that just now? He really thought that we were going to reward him. He was so excited. Stupid pig." The familiar disdain, no, it was even more serious than before, drowned Ada like a terrible tide. He didn't understand. He had clearly helped them, so why didn't they acknowledge him? Why? This was because people only interacted with existences of equal status. Would a person become friends with a beast without any dignity? Obviously not. Ada belittled himself. It would be strange if the noble Sword Sacred clan would treat him as one of their own. The patriarch stared at the slave mark on Mo Heng's chest and sneered. "Mo Heng, it turns out that you've been hiding your strength all along. You've even deceived the 5 great sages in the family. However, a slave for a day is a slave for life. Don't even think about escaping the control of the famous Sword Sacred clan." It turned out that after learning that this secret room was refined by Mo Heng, the patriarch realized that something was amiss. Mo Heng had been hiding his true strength all this time. Now that the famous Sword Sacred clan had 1,000 things to do, they couldn't afford to lose a refining genius like Mo Heng. Catching him back was not secondary to recovering the lost primordial energy. He didn't leave a slave mark on Ada. A trash like Ada was not worthy of him personally using the mark. What he did was to determine the other party's position through the bloodline relationship between Ada and Mo Heng. "Look after him." The patriarch casually produced a long chain and locked Ada up like a dog. Then he went to find the 5 great sages. After the tribulation fire destroyed the famous Sword Sacred clan, it went to chase after the 5 great sages. It was unknown whether they were still alive. Those 5 great sages were the most important core of the famous Sword Sacred clan. If they died, the famous Sword Sacred clan would recuperate and recover. The traces left behind by the tribulation fire were very obvious. Wherever it passed, the world was scorched. Following the scorched traces, the patriarch found a place that the famous Sword Sacred clan was most unwilling to step into, the Black Abyss. Judging from the traces, the tribulation fire had chased into the Black Abyss. The 5 great sages must have also stepped into it. But what he didn't know was that 2 more people had also hidden in the black abyss. Deep in the black abyss, on a cliff, Bai Shui hugged Su Yu tightly in her arms, secretly using her energy to heal his eyes. "You're going too far, aren't you?" Bai Shui looked at Su Yu's blind eyes, puzzled. Su Yu's eyes were still tingling with pain. The sharp sword energy of the absolute heaven sword was still reverberating in his eyes. As long as the sword energy was not extinguished, any treatment from Bai Shui would be useless. "Don't waste your energy, I'll do it myself," Su Yu said calmly. He had lost his sight once before, so this time he was very calm. Even if he couldn't use his eyes, he could still use his soul eyes to see through everything. "You'd better stay away from me." Su Yu slowly opened his eyes. Bai Shui was startled. "Why?" Su Yu did not speak. His eyes, which had lost focus, opened, and there was a pale color in the depths of his pupils. That was the state of his soul eyes. Once it was activated, everything in the world could be seen through, including Bai Shui in front of Su Yu. Her luxurious dress was completely seen through. Her entire body was naked in front of Su Yu, and he could see everything clearly. When his gaze swept past her chest, he could not help but be surprised. "It's so big." When Bai Shui was naked, it was only the size of a steamed bun. It could be imagined that Bai Shui had hidden herself. What Su Yu saw was only the surface. The seemingly petite Bai Shui actually had another body. Finally, Bai Shui sensed something and immediately covered her chest. Why are your eyes so perverted?" Su Yu averted his gaze and calmly said, "I told you to stay away from me. Shameless, despicable, perverted, dirty." Bai Shui muttered, the blush on her face lingering. In the past, it had been a fake body, so Su Yu had seen it. But what he had just seen was her real body. "Shoo!" Su Yu suddenly gestured for her to keep quiet, pointing deep into the black abyss. "Don't speak." Bai Shui covered her chest, looking down into the black abyss. She did not see any movement for a long time. "You're trying to be mysterious again," she said. Before she could finish, Bai Shui finally heard something. Lowering her head to take a closer look, she discovered that black skeletons were surging out of the black abyss like a tidal wave. There were all sorts of skeletons, but all of them were corpses that had died on the battlefield. For some reason, they had left the black abyss en masse and were climbing upwards. From their speed, they seemed to be in a panic. Chapter 29-25. Bai Shui panicked. She immediately prepared to flee upwards to avoid encountering the skeleton army. However, Su Yu pulled him back and said, "Don't be impatient. The skeletons had no murderous intent. They were just moving." Indeed, the army of skeletons, like a black tide, quickly climbed up the cliff. When they encountered the 2 of them, they did not hesitate. They all went around them and fled in a panic. After half an incense stick of time, the uncountable black tide army had all retreated. The black abyss had returned to its previous deathly stillness. But the more it was so, the more they felt apprehensive. It was as if there was a terrifying existence staring at them from within the black abyss. Su Yu also felt apprehensive. "We should not stay here for long. It was not advisable to go deeper into the black abyss." But right at this moment, an incomparably violent fluctuation came from above their heads. A golden spear turned into a golden stream of light and fiercely shot towards where the 2 of them were. The light was even more powerful than Bai Shui, an ancient saint. It was almost at the level of a great saint. By the time the 2 of them reacted, it was too late to escape. In the blink of an eye, Su Yu raised his hand and grabbed the golden spear with the help of Heavenly Prince Miraflower's powerful body. Creak, creak, creak. The golden spear created a purple flame in his palm, drawing blood from the Heavenly Prince. But its speed was greatly reduced. Su Yu and Bai Shui could easily dodge it. Puff! The golden spear pierced through Su Yu's black robe, nailing him to the cliff. The owner of the spear let out a surprised sound. "Who are you? You managed to withstand my attack." The newcomer was the master of the Sword Saint tribe, a being only one step away from becoming a great saint. In terms of combat power, he was not much weaker than a real great saint. When he descended, he had noticed the abnormality of the black tide of skeletons. They had all gone around a certain area, so he concluded that there might be someone there and tried to shoot out a spear. He did not expect them to withstand it. "It's you." When they got closer, the master suddenly realized. "Where is the primordial energy? Hand it over." Bai Shui gritted her teeth, cursing her bad luck. She had barely escaped the pursuit of 5 great sages, but now she was blocked by the patriarch. That primal energy was not easy to obtain. Should he try to resist? Don't try to rely on luck. When you first arrived, I already knew that there was a problem with your identities. The patriarch said indifferently, "Since I dared to let you in, I naturally have the confidence to make you stay." With a wave of his hand, a small rotating cauldron appeared in his palm. Bai Shui was unfamiliar with the small cauldron, but Su Yu was very familiar with it. "Mortal life cauldron?" Su Yu muttered softly. Back then, the human ancestor used the mortal life cauldron to leave behind a gigantic hole in the ancient battlefield, which became the black abyss of today. It would be strange if the famed sword sacred race wasn't envious. They had painstakingly refined the mortal life cauldron replica for many years. "Hey, you do have a good eye," the clan master said in surprise. "One of you is the temple master of the Temple of Heaven, and the other is holding a fake invitation letter. This combination is really interesting." When Su Yu first came in, the invitation letter had not been seen through, but there were only so many invitations sent out. In the end, there was one extra invitation letter. Even an idiot from the famed Sword Sacred clan would know that one of the invitations was fake. In comparison, Su Yu, who was beside Bai Shui, was the most suspicious. But they did not make a move, planning to wait for the absolute heaven sword to appear and kill them all. But Su Yu and Bai Shui's vitality was exceptionally strong. Not only did they not die, but they also snatched away a large portion of the primal energy. Bai Shui's heart sank. She had still been recognized. This primal energy was a little tricky. If the famed Sword Sacred clan went to the Temple of Heaven to cause trouble in the future, the Temple of Heaven would not be able to resist. "Hand over the primal energy." The clan master approached step by step, emitting a tyrannical aura. Su Yu grabbed the golden spear on his shoulder and decisively pulled Bai Shui into the depths of the black abyss. "You want to leave?" The clan master immediately gave chase. But not long after, the clan master abruptly stopped in his tracks. He had felt a suction force from the black abyss. It was as if a huge vortex of air was wreaking havoc below. Su Yu and Bai Shui had no choice but to stop as well, their expressions grave. Su Yu's transparent eyes could see even more clearly. What vortex was that? It was clearly a gigantic skeletal demonic beast. It was opening its mouth wide, crazily swallowing the remaining skeletons on the cliff. After swallowing them, the size of the skeletal demonic beast would increase by a notch. Su Yu's scalp went numb. Anything could exist in the black abyss. His heart sank. There really was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. The clan master was also extremely fearful. "Hand over the primal energy to me, and I can promise to let you live." If Su Yu and the others were sucked in, the consequences would be dire. However, it was absolutely impossible for him to let them live. What happened in the famed Sword Sacred clan could not be revealed to the outside world. As he spoke, he approached step by step. Su Yu grabbed Bai Shui, multitasking. He observed the movements of the giant demonic beast below while guarding against the famed Sword Sacred clan master. Both were closing in on them, especially the giant demonic beast. After noticing the 3 of them, it immediately gave up on the other skeletons and charged toward them. When it was 100,000 zhang away from them, a bolt of purple lightning suddenly shot out from the mouth of the demonic beast. The lightning was extremely fast. Even Su Yu's transparent eyes could not capture it. But his heart was alarmed, and he felt a strong sense of danger. Without hesitation, he grabbed Bai Shui and dodged to the side. The famed sword-sacred clan master could not see what was happening within the black abyss. But seeing Su Yu and the others suddenly dodge, he knew something was wrong and dodged as well. But he was still a step too late. A purple snake like withered vines wrapped around the clan master's ankle, then fiercely pulled downwards. Even someone as strong as the clan master could not resist and was immediately pulled into the black abyss. No! At the critical moment, the clan master felt a strong desire to live, throwing out the mortal cauldron. Light shot out from within the cauldron, enveloping Su Yu and Bai Shui. The two of them were immediately pulled into the replica mortal cauldron by the light. Su Yu and Bai Shui had no choice but to resist, trying to free themselves from the mortal cauldron. Thus, they barely managed to slow down the clan master's fall. Just as he thought he had escaped death, the skeleton demonic beast below suddenly exerted its strength, instantly dragging the clan master down. Su Yu and Bai Shui were also dragged down, falling rapidly. Seeing that they were about to be swallowed along with the clan master, Su Yu decisively shot out a shred of holy body power, cutting off the light that was dragging them down. Ding! At the critical moment they finally broke free. They could hear the clan master's violent screams coming from the mouth of the skeleton demonic beast below. But Su Yu and Bai Shui were not out of danger. They were less than 10,000 zhang away from the skeleton demonic beast. Chapter 29-26. If they retreated now, the skeleton demonic beast would use its tongue, and they would not have any time to react. In a split second, Su Yu did not retreat. He grabbed Bai Shui and ran in the opposite direction. Not only did he not retreat, but he charged toward the black abyss. They crossed 1,000 feet in an instant. The skeleton demonic beast extended its tongue, wanting to wrap around Su Yu and Bai Shui, but they were already behind it. Its tongue lost its agility and brushed past Su Yu's shoulder, unable to wrap around Su Yu in time. Taking this opportunity, Su Yu and Bai Shui leaped into the depths of the black abyss. Creak! The skeleton demonic beast let out a roar, turning to chase after Su Yu and Bai Shui. The two of them could only brace themselves as they headed deeper into the black abyss. The closer they got, the more they felt the threat within the depths of the black abyss. But the skeleton demonic beast was hot on their heels, and they had no choice but to continue deeper. Half a day later, the chase did not stop. What made Su Yu's heart palpitate was that the deeper they went, the more ferocious skeletons there were. Even they were moving further and further away from the abyss, as if they were seriously shocked. They even met skeletons that were stronger than the skeleton demonic beast. Everything told them that there was a great danger at the bottom of the abyss. In the end, even the skeleton demonic beast that had been chasing them all this time finally stopped. Its burning eyes flickered with a hint of fear. After letting out a cry of dissatisfaction, it decisively turned and fled the abyss. Su Yu and Bai Shui immediately stopped. Their surroundings could no longer be described as dark. They could not see anything around them, as if they were in a black swamp. Even Su Yu's transparent eyes could not see clearly what was going on at the bottom of the abyss. Let's leave quickly. Bai Shui unknowingly grabbed Su Yu's sleeve, her heart filled with worry. Su Yu did not dare stay any longer. As he was about to leave, he suddenly saw a ball of emerald light flash past the bottom of the abyss. That is... Su Yu was shocked. Even though it had only been a flash, he had seen it clearly. The absolute heaven sword. Wasn't that sword successfully refined by the famous sword sacred race and obtained? Why would it appear in the abyss? As Su Yu recalled the frightening power of the sword, his heart thumped wildly. This sword was said to have been forged by the Xiaoyao Emperor. All the materials used were unknown materials from the sacred mountain, and the human-shaped tribulation fire and other lofty flames were used. It took an entire era's worth of effort to forge this sword. Su Yu had witnessed its power with his own eyes. Even a great sage expert was killed by a single slash. There was no way to resist it. In the entire 9-star civilization, apart from the primal Chaos Heavens clan, no one could contend against them. If he could get his hands on this sword, so what if he had to face the goddess race alone? You go first. Su Yu's eyes flickered. I saw the absolute heaven sword. He didn't hide anything. If White Snow was willing to take the risk, he wouldn't mind sharing the sword with her. If they were unwilling to take the risk, he wouldn't make things difficult for them. Absolute heaven sword? Bai Shui's eyes burned with passion, but when she looked at the dark abyss that she couldn't even see through, she instinctively felt fear. After struggling for a long time, he sighed and said, I'm not going. Moreover, I advise you not to go. The absolute heaven sword is not something we can control. The black abyss was extremely dangerous. So what if he obtained the absolute heaven sword? Did they have the right to hold such a sword in their hands? They couldn't withstand the wrath of the Saint Mountain's emperor. I've made up my mind. Su Yu's eyes flickered. He wasn't greedy for the absolute heaven sword, but there were too many reasons for him to master even greater power and artifacts. Above him were the people who trusted him. Below him were Xia Jingyu, Qin Xianer, Xie Xiaoye, and other important people in his life. Even if it was risky, he had to get the absolute heaven sword. Bai Shui looked deeply at Su Yu and sighed. All right, you're on your own. Let's part ways here. This place was filled with incomparably dangerous skeletons. She couldn't wait for Su Yu nearby. Go, Su Yu said lightly. Both sides had gotten their hands on the primordial energy. It was time to bid farewell to each other. Take care. With that, Bai Shui leaped away. Not long after, she remembered something. You should return the seal of the Heavenly Law Palace to me. But when she looked back, she found that Su Yu had already entered the black abyss. The veins on Bai Shui's forehead throbbed. Is this guy going to reincarnate? Roar! Suddenly, the threatening sounds of the skeletons could be heard. Bai Shui's heart tightened and she immediately left. She couldn't help but worry. This guy, please don't use the seal of the Heavenly Law Palace. The seal of the Heavenly Law Palace of the aristocratic families was something that could only be found by chance. It could never fall into the hands of a wanderer. But Su Yu was so powerful, he couldn't be a wanderer, right? Su Yu plunged into the deepest part of the black abyss. Soon, he felt something solid beneath his feet. He had reached the bottom of the black abyss. The ground here was boiling with a layer of evil energy. The evil energy was so deep that it even began to seep into Tianzi Jinghua's body. Su Yu's heart trembled. His holy body power surged out, forcing the evil energy out of his body. Not only that, but he also set up a Yuan realm, holy body power, and chaotic force around him. The three powers combined to form a defense. Only after ensuring his personal safety did he have the leisure to observe the situation outside. Ding ding, the crisp sound of a sword fell into his ears. Su Yu immediately walked over cautiously. When he was 10,000 feet away, he finally managed to see something with his transparent eye. He saw 5 figures fighting with the Absolute Heaven Sword. The Absolute Heaven Sword had been sheathed, so its power was greatly reduced. That was how the 5 figures were able to compete with it. Su Yu walked forward again. Suddenly, he stepped on a soft protrusion under his feet and stiffened slightly. He looked down and found that it was just a soft stone. He didn't care and continued to move forward. After 10,000 feet, he finally saw the scene clearly. However, what caused him to suck in a breath of cold air was that the 5 figures were none other than the 5 great sages of the Sword Saint clan. Each of the 5 great sages had a long chain wrapped around their neck. Even the body of the Absolute Heaven Sword was bound by a chain. The 6 chains bound them, and they were like puppets, fighting and killing each other. This, could it be? Su Yu looked at the source of the 6 chains and found that the end of the chains was embedded in a mountain. Just as Su Yu was surprised, the mountain moved, and in the pitch-black sky of the abyss, 2 blood-red cracks appeared at the same time. The cracks grew larger and larger, and finally opened into 2 spheres. In the center of the sphere there was a golden round hole. It moved slightly and aimed at Suyu. Chapter 29-27. Could it be that he had stepped on Gulp? The blood moon in the darkness began to turn and stare at Suyu. In the darkness, there seemed to be something slowly approaching. At the critical moment, Suyu displayed the 8 Great Yuan realm, condensing it into a realm torch, forcibly illuminating the surroundings. The light only lasted for a moment before it was swallowed up by the darkness again. But in an instant, Suyu had already seen everything in front of him. His pupils shrank to the size of a needle. In the moment of the light, he saw a huge golden skeleton. It sat cross-legged in the black abyss, its hands flat on its knees. A huge head was looking down at Suyu. What Suyu had stepped on just now was the thumb of its foot. That was not the only terrifying thing. He saw with his own eyes that the chains on the 5 great saints and the absolute heaven sword were all wrapped around the giant's wrist. In other words, it was the golden skeleton that imprisoned them. Thinking of this, Suyu's scalp went numb. He had seen the peerless power of the absolute heaven sword with his own eyes. But even the powerful absolute heaven sword had been captured alive. Moreover, it was forced to be controlled by the 5 great saints, like a puppet performing for the golden skeleton. Suyu suddenly remembered an ancient rumor. Every time the moon was full, there would be a huge towering battle shadow projected between heaven and earth from the black abyss. Wherever it was projected, everything would wither and not even a blade of grass would grow. Could it be that the owner of that enormous figure was this golden puppet? At this moment, the 2 blood moon-like eyes slowly approached. He could faintly hear the movement caused by the huge body moving. Suyu's heart quivered. He finally understood why the creatures in the black abyss were fleeing at all costs. That was because this extremely ancient and terrifying golden skeleton had awakened. Suyu did not move recklessly. The 5 great saints and the absolute heaven sword were imprisoned as puppets. His resistance would only be futile, and it would also trigger dangerous actions from the golden skeleton. The 2 blood moons were getting closer and closer. Finally, it was only 100 feet away from Suyu. In the blood mist, Suyu could vaguely see the face of the golden skeleton. "You, holy body!" The golden skeleton let out an ancient and boundless voice. Above its head, an extremely old and decaying oil lamp slowly appeared. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. Holy body oil lamp? It was an oil lamp that only a sacred body could possess. However, the golden skeleton's oil lamp was much bigger and more complicated than Suyu's. It was conceivable that when he was at his peak, his divine body had reached a terrifying level, and he had received an endless amount of faith. The reason for his death was self-evident. Destroyed by the Son of Heaven. However, Suyu did not sense any kindness from this fallen saint body. Instead, those blood-red eyes revealed a trace of coldness that made Suyu's hair stand on end. "Give me your body," as expected, the golden skeleton spoke in a hoarse voice. It then raised its golden finger and pointed at Suyu's body. Chila, his black robe was torn apart, revealing his true appearance. Mirrorflower Heaven's son. What? The 5 great sages and the ultimate heaven sword were all shocked. The person who stole their energy was actually Heavenly Prince Mirrorflower? How could that be? Heavenly Prince Mirrorflower was still in the process of resurrection, and Heavenly Prince Xiao Yao was in charge of the whole process. How could he let Heavenly Prince Mirrorflower go looking for energy by himself? Moreover, the absolute heaven sword was forged for Heavenly Prince Mirrorflower. It was a sword prepared for her. Why did Heavenly Prince Mirrorflower make such a big fuss about the birth of the absolute heaven sword? Everything made them understand that things were not as simple as they had imagined. The golden skeleton's finger should have crushed Suyu to the ground. However, when it noticed Suyu's body, it withdrew its golden finger instinctively. Its blood-red eyes quickly distanced themselves from Su Yu, revealing the fear that came from the depths of its soul. It seemed that it still remembered the fragmented memories of its death. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Su Yu did not retreat. Instead, he slowly walked towards the golden skeleton. Creak! The golden skeleton's fear deepened. Its two blood-red eyes kept trembling, and its huge body could not help but stand up. It strode deeper into the black abyss to escape. So much so that the 5 great sages and the ultimate heaven sword had no time to care about them. They left them where they were, not daring to pay any attention to them. The 5 great sages felt as if they had been pardoned. They tried their best to break free from the chains on their bodies. Su Yu's eyes flashed. He flew to the front of the ultimate heaven sword and grasped the scabbard. He noticed that the hilt of the ultimate heaven sword had a strange blood-red color. He felt that something was wrong, so he did not touch it. Stop! Huang Dashing shouted sternly as he untied the chains. Fake Mirrorflower Heaven, do you think you can fool us? The other 4 great Saint Clansmen had the same attitude. They were the ones who had communicated with Xiaoyao Heaven, so they understood Mirrorflower Heaven's current situation best. The Mirrorflower Heaven in front of them was not her real self. Su Yu was secretly annoyed. He shouted in a low voice, "Sure. Do you want to die?" Were they afraid that the golden skeleton could not hear such a loud noise? The 5 great sages realized this. They untied the chains and hurriedly prepared to intercept Su Yu. Su Yu came and went freely. He grabbed the ultimate heaven sword and immediately fled to the top of the black abyss. However, he had only taken a few steps when the huge footsteps that had disappeared reappeared. Thump! Su Yu and the 5 great sages felt their hearts skip a beat. The golden skeleton had returned. It had a certain level of intelligence. From the words of Huang Dashing and the others, Su Yu's body of Mirrorflower Heaven was not the one it was afraid of. Su Yu had no time to argue with them. He used all the strength he could use to run all the way up. Crack! 5 consecutive sounds of chains breaking could be heard. The 5 great sages broke free one after another, fleeing outwards in terror. Before this, they had been forced to flee into the abyss by the disastrous fire. The disastrous fire had a premonition that there was something dangerous in the black abyss. Seeing that the situation was not good, it had left first. However, by the time they wanted to leave, it was too late. This terrifying golden skeleton had suppressed all of them with just a little finger. Even the ultimate heaven sword, which had fallen into the black abyss, was not spared. They were all captured. If they did not escape now, they would be trapped in the black abyss for the rest of their lives. There was no guarantee that they would be eaten by the skeleton at any time. Roar! From afar, the loud roar of the golden skeleton could be heard. The 5 great sages were horrified as they ran all the way. They had only run for a cup of tea's time when the entire black abyss began to tremble. The 4 walls of the black abyss shook violently as if there was an earthquake. Su Yu looked down through his soul eyes, and his pupils constricted. The golden skeleton was like a human ape, climbing the cliff of the black abyss and catching up with them at an astonishing speed. It would not be long before the golden skeleton caught up and captured them again. There was no time for all of them to escape. Chapter 29-28. Since this sword was forged for Emperor Xiaoyao, could Emperor Mirrorflower's body control it as well? Seeing that the golden skeleton was about to catch up to him, Su Yu decisively grabbed the hilt of his sword. The blood-red hilt of the sword was where the Feng clan's sacred ancestor and old demon blood's resentment resided. Upon contact, their grievances immediately rushed into Su Yu's soul, trying to control it and indirectly control the absolute heaven sword. Without batting an eyelid, Su Yu opened the soul realm and condensed a layer of soul coat on the surface of his soul. The two's resentment attacked the outer layer of the soul and were immediately repelled. They were indeed great saints when they were alive, but now they were just remnant souls. Hence, they posed no threat to Su Yu, who had mastered the soul domain. However, it would cause some trouble and affect him from activating the Absolute Heaven Sword. If you want to take revenge, then don't try to affect me. Su Yu's voice reverberated in their souls, ensuring that their remnant souls could hear him. The Feng clan's divine ancestor and old demon Shui stopped their attacks and listened to Su Yu's voice. If this stalemate continues, I will die in the hands of the golden skeletons, but you will also be buried in the black abyss forever, never to see the light of day again. Help me now, and I will help you deal with your enemies in the future. Maybe I can even release you from the Absolute Heaven Sword. What? If it was the former, they wouldn't be moved. But how could the Wind Clan's divine ancestor and old demon, Shui, not be moved? Why should we believe what you said? The thoughts of the Feng Clan's divine ancestor echoed rapidly in Su Yu's soul. Su Yu replied calmly, "Because I am the owner of the divine monument of the returning ruins." He clenched his fist, and the returning ruin divine steel flickered in his palm. The moment it appeared, the Feng clan's sacred ancestor and old demon Shui immediately let out miserable screams. The two of them were already dead objects, only leaving behind their remnant wills in time, and the returning ruins divine steel was the final destination for all returning ruins people. It was easy to imagine the suppression on them. "Quickly put it away!" Old Devil Shui shouted. The Wind Clan's divine ancestor endured the pain and said excitedly, "Greetings, Sinkhole Emperor Lord." Su Yu's eyes flickered. The Master of the Ruins of Return? What was that? Could it be that he was the former master of the Void End Realm? Old Devil Shui was also shocked. "Sinkhole Emperor Lord? You? If it's really you, I, Old Devil Shui, am willing to follow you from now on." "Me too," the Wind Clan's divine ancestor said excitedly. In this world, who could truly bring someone back from the dead? He wasn't the master of the domain of life, nor was he the master of death. Instead, he was the Sinkhole Empyrean Lord. The first two could only affect the life and death of a living being. But the latter was the one who truly controlled the cycle of reincarnation. If he nodded, how difficult would it be to bring them, who had already returned to the mortal world? "As long as you are willing to cooperate, everything can be discussed," Su Yu said calmly. Both of them were pleasantly surprised, and they immediately withdrew from Su Yu's soul and returned to the hilt of their swords. Without any more obstacles, Su Yu immediately pulled out the Absolute Heaven Sword. The shocking sharpness displayed the power of destruction. The entire black abyss was shaken by the reappearance of the Absolute Heaven Sword. The scalps of the 5 great saints below were numb, and they immediately avoided Su Yu, lest they be destroyed by his sword. Even the golden skeleton that was chasing them slowed down. His blood-red eyes flickered with a flickering light revealing fear. Su Yu did not say a word. He held the Absolute Heaven Sword tightly and slashed toward the depths of the black abyss. There was no sword chi, nor was there any sharp aura. But as the sword slashed down, the cliff of the black abyss below immediately broke, and countless boulders fell with a rumble, pressing down on the golden skeleton. With a roar, the golden skeleton was pressed down, but it was unwilling to give up and was struggling to get up again. Su Yu took advantage of this opportunity and did not hesitate to use all his domains, even exposing the power of his holy body, just to speed up his escape from this place. Took a whole day to come here, but it only took half a day to leave. When he rushed out of the black abyss and saw the light of day again, Su Yu let out a deep breath. The black abyss was too oppressive, and what he saw was only the tip of the iceberg of the black abyss. There might be even more vast areas inside, with even more terrifying dead spirit. Roar! A roar that sounded like it was right next to his ear suddenly exploded. Su Yu's body trembled, and he immediately fled to the horizon. Turning his head, he saw that the golden skeleton had crawled out of the black abyss. But as soon as its head emerged, it was shone by the sun, and its body immediately emitted a sizzling sound. It was actually burned by the sun. With a painful roar, the golden skeleton sank back into the black abyss. This place was an ancient battlefield, and there were too many remnants left behind. As an evil being, the golden skeleton was bound to be attacked by the remnants of this place. Seeing this scene, Suyu was a lot more relieved. But when the rest of the light swept over him, he could not help but be slightly shocked. He escaped, and the 5 great sages were also able to escape. The 5 of them looked at Suyu from afar, their expressions extremely complicated. They wanted to chase after him, but they were afraid of the absolute heaven sword in Suyu's palm. Suyu's eyes flashed, and he raised the absolute heaven sword and pointed it at them. The 5 great sages were scared out of their wit. How would they dare to think about it? They turned and ran, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Little did they know that Suyu's palm was already covered in blood. He was now in the body of Prince Mirrorflower, and yet he was still bleeding. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The hilt of the absolute heaven sword was constantly shaking, trying to break free from Suyu's control. This was not the doing of the Feng clan's holy ancestor and old demon Shui. On the contrary, they had been helping Suyu suppress the abnormality of the absolute heaven sword. Because it was the sword spirit of the absolute heaven sword that was trying to break free. This sword spirit had sensed the power of the holy body from Suyu's body, which was the most hostile power of the Holy Mountain Emperor. Therefore, it determined that Suyu was not its master and refused to be controlled. Returned to the sheath. Suyu sheathed the absolute heaven sword and no longer touched the hilt. Only then did the absolute heaven sword stop. Suyu himself was extremely exhausted, and he fell weakly, leaning against a huge rock and gasping for breath. The attack of the absolute heaven sword just now had caused a considerable loss. Almost all of his strength had been drained. During his rest, Suyu recalled his trip to the Holy Sword tribe and could not help but click his tongue. There had been many dangers, and a slight carelessness would have meant death. It was not easy to survive. However, all the risks were worth it. Not only had he obtained the primordial energy, but the amount far exceeded his expectations, reaching a full 70%. More importantly, he had obtained the absolute heaven sword. This was really unexpected. According to Emoheng, this sword was a quasi-saint artifact, no less than the divine 9-dragon cauldron of the past. If I had grasped this sword back then, I would have been able to subdue the 9th realm, Suyu said regretfully. Now that he lacked the 9th realm, he could not begin to refine the real divine 9-dragon cauldron. Forget it, the 9th realm's ambition is higher than the sky. Hiding is only temporary, and it will show itself sooner or later, Suyu murmured. After resting for a moment, he swept his gaze and could not help but look beyond the sky. He wondered how the common people who had stayed behind in the broken civilization were doing. The demonic beast army that was handed over to them should have been tamed, right? Chapter 29:29. He had been gone for so long it was time to return, right? With that in mind, he left the ancient battlefield and headed toward the exit of the 9-star civilization. 10 days later, Suyu's eyes finally reflected a lush, dark green color. After 10 days of trekking, he had finally successfully left the ancient battlefield. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly caught a glimpse of a figure wearing a bamboo hat and a coat. He was not far away and had left at about the same time as Suyu. Suyu had not paid much attention and had no intention of spying on him. But his eyes had still been injured by the absolute heaven sword and were in a state of blindness. Thus, he had maintained the use of his soul eyes. Thus, with one glance, he had accidentally seen through the other party's bamboo hat. Seeing the figure, Suyu was a little surprised. Emoheng, the genius craftsman imprisoned by the famed Sword Saint clan? Sensing something, Emoheng abruptly turned to look at Zhang Xian, sending him a warning look. But upon closer inspection, he realized it was Suyu and could not help but cry out in surprise, "It's you!" He quickly walked over, his expression incredulous. You were able to escape the famed Sword Saint clan alive? He knew that Suyu had escaped before the disastrous fire appeared. But he did not know that Suyu had the ability to face the pursuit of the famed Sword Saint clan. Suyu smiled. You are the one who is truly surprising. His words seemed to have a deeper meaning. No matter how one looked at it, Mo Hung was surprising. Firstly, he could also escape, as if he had predicted that the famed Sword Saint clan would encounter a drastic change. Secondly, his craftsmanship skills were truly extraordinary. Not only did he predict that there was a problem with the crafting process of the Absolute Heaven Sword, but even more frightening was that the iron ball he crafted was several times more effective than the one crafted by Huang Dashing and the others. So much so that Suyu had relied on a single iron ball to snatch away a full 70% of the primordial energy. No one would believe it if they said it. It could be seen that Mo Heng's craftsmanship skills were the best among the 100 craftsmen of the famed Sword Saint clan. Even in the entire 9-star civilization, there were not many who could compare. After all, the famed Sword Saint clan was the pinnacle of craftsmanship. The other forces should not have many more powerful craftsmen than the famed Sword Saint clan. You flatter me. Mo Heng let out a light laugh. Congratulations on getting your wish and obtaining most of the primordial energy. But to be honest, I never thought that you would really succeed. Mo Heng sighed. In the beginning, he had warned Suyu and Bai Shui not to enter the famed Sword Saint clan, or they would be in deep trouble. But what was the result? Suyu said, I have to thank you for your gift. Otherwise, I wouldn't be where I am today. It was conceivable that if they really went empty-handed like what the invitation letter said, would they be able to obtain a trace of primordial energy? Of course not. They could only watch helplessly as Huang Dashing and the others used the iron balls to collect all the primordial energy, leaving nothing behind. Your Excellency, congratulations on gaining your freedom. May I know where you will go next? Suyu finally had some free time, so he chatted with him for a bit. Mo Heng looked at the vast land and shook his head slightly. I don't know either. He had been imprisoned for half a epoch. His clan of the past had long since been obliterated by the passage of time, and he had lost contact with his old friends. Although he had escaped, he did not have a place to stay. Are you interested in following me to the outside world? Suyu pointed at the dark starry sky of the boundless expanse. Mo Heng thought for a moment, looking Suyu up and down, deep in thought. Suyu knew what he was worried about and said, Don't worry, I am not from the famed Sword Saint clan. I do not need to confine you to craft any artifact. After careful thought, Mo Heng slowly nodded. All right, I can accompany you to have a look. But let me make this clear. Do not persuade me to join any forces. I have had enough of being bound. In the end, he agreed. Because he remembered the scene of Suyu saving him. As a strong martial artist, he could have ignored him, who was about to be killed by the skeleton, but Suyu still did so. It could be seen that Suyu still had a sense of justice in his heart that was rarely seen in strong martial artists. Would such a person confine him? Obviously not. Moreover, he had not fully repaid the debt of saving his life. It would not be too late to find an opportunity along the way to repay him. Of course, Suyu said indifferently. And so, the two of them set off together. A few months later, they once again came to the entrance of the 9-star civilization. The checks here were stricter than before. And what made Suyu frown slightly was that in the past, only those who entered the 9-star civilization had to be checked. There was no need to search when leaving. Now, even leaving had to show a document, and the pythons in the passageway had all been replaced with gold. The presence of a total of 9 giant pythons made it impossible for the person with the fake document to hide. This is troublesome, Mo Heng said with a frown. I have been imprisoned for many years. The document has long been destroyed. Without the document, he could not leave the 9-star civilization. The 9-star civilization is not a place to stay for long. That foolish son of mine will most likely save the core members of the Sword Saint tribe. After they catch their breath, they will track me down sooner or later. I must head to the outer world. Su Yu frowned and asked, "To tell you the truth, I do not have the real document. How do I obtain it?" There had to be an organization that issued the document, right? It could not have appeared out of thin air. Moreover, Su Yu discovered that in the 9-star civilization, it was not only the strong who had the document. Many low-level cultivators and even ordinary people had the document. It could be seen that obtaining the document was not very difficult. Obtaining the real document is both easy and difficult, Emohing said. In order to obtain the document, you need to be at least an influential family with the approval of the stone statue issued by the Holy Mountain. Su Yu's eyes flickered. Stone statue? Emohing said, "That's right. Every influential family has one. Only the document that has been stamped by the stone statue is the real document." As he spoke, Emohing sighed incessantly. If it was in the past, a casual word from me would cause countless great clans to rush to issue me official documents. But now, I believe many people have already forgotten my name. His social circle had long since been destroyed during his imprisonment for half an era. Moreover, even if he still had contact with them, he would not dare to take the initiative to look for them. Who could guarantee that they had not been bribed by the Sword Saint tribe? Once he came into contact with them, he might be caught again. The stone statue you mentioned, is it this? Su Yu took out a very simple stone statue from the space storage device. The base of the stone statue was carved with complicated words. This stone statue exuded an extremely dense aura of chaos. Seeing this item, Emoheng's eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" His face was filled with astonishment. He did not understand at all. If Su Yu had this item, why did he not have the document? "Oh, it's true," Su Yu muttered. "It looks like I really did snatch an incredible item." This item was one of the 3 items he had snatched from Bai Shui's personal storage device. He had already used the invitation letter from the Sword Saint tribe. There was still the seal of the Heavenly Law Palace and the stone statue in front of him. Chapter 29:30. Snatched. Emoheng clicked his tongue. Then you really did snatch something good. With this item, you can gather all the wanderers from the outside world. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. Yes, most of the wanderers would want to obtain the identity of a 9-star civilization. But their identities were very special. Most of them were defeated people who had been chased away, or those sinners who had been exiled to the outside world, or the descendants of those sinners. The forces of the 9-star civilizations were not willing to give them the official documents, because whoever gave them the official documents would be responsible for them. If they caused a huge incident in the 9-star civilizations after obtaining the official documents, the force that gave them the official documents would be severely punished. Ha ha ha, I really have to thank Bai Shui. Su Yu was suddenly enlightened. He had always been worried about his own people. The people in the Nightmare Crossing Lotus were like him, without official document. He could think of a way to come to the 9-star civilizations, and he could do whatever he wanted there. But could they? If they were not careful and were found to have no official documents in the 9-star civilizations, the consequences would be dire. So they could only stay in the Nightmare Crossing Lotus. But now it was different. With this stone statue, he could create official documents in bulk for them. After thinking for a moment, Su Yu took out the seal of the Heavenly Law Palace. What about this item? What does it do? Emoheng looked at the item, his mouth twitching. Did you just rob the Palace of Heavenly Law? Why did you take out their seal of the Heavenly Law Palace? Su Yu asked. Apart from commanding the Palace of Heavenly Law, what use does this item have in the outside world? Emoheng clicked his tongue. Use? With this item, you would have a dominating position in the outside world. Wherever you go, all the wanderers would bow down and worship you. The Palace of Heavenly Law is known as the Alliance of the Path Masters. It is the holy land of the Path Masters. With this item, you can command the outside world. The competition among the 9-star civilizations was extremely fierce. Most of the forces appeared in the form of families. There were very few organizations like the Palace of Heavenly Law that were formed by ordinary living beings. Many wanderers with good cultivation bases wanted to join the Palace of Heavenly Law. Unfortunately, the Palace of Heavenly Law never favored the wanderers of the outside world. If Suyu held the seal of the Heavenly Law Palace and appeared as the master of the Heavenly Law Palace, one could imagine how influential he would be to the wanderers. Suyu was overjoyed. Stripping Bai Shui naked and forcefully snatching the crystal storage device from her chest had been a wise decision. Many thanks for your guidance. Suyu went to a corner and wrote 2 official documents on the spot, then stamped them with the stone statue's seal. As such, Suyu and Mo Hing swaggered into the passageway with the real document in their hands. When Mo Hing passed through, the golden python's eyes scanned Mo Hing's body. Then, it withdrew its gaze expressionlessly, as if nothing had happened. The inspector in the passageway immediately let them pass without making things difficult for them. It was Suyu's turn next. When he walked through the passageway, the 9 giant pythons looked at him and confirmed that it was the real document, so they didn't stop him. However, when the 10th eye looked over, it suddenly let out a sharp cry. Suyu's heart skipped a beat when he saw it. This giant golden python was the one that had discovered that he was a fake and its attack was ineffective. The document in Suyu's hand was real, but the golden python still remembered its aura. Now, it recognized it immediately. This beast. Suyu cursed in his heart, but he remained calm and did not panic. Whoosh! Dozens of powerful fighters locked their gazes on Suyu, filled with murderous intent. Powerful fighters appeared on both sides of the passageway at the same time, surrounding him with powerful Dao artifacts. The leader was none other than the black-robed man from before. He walked over solemnly and stared at Suyu cautiously. Hand over the document. Suyu handed the document over expressionlessly. The black-robed man took it and looked at it carefully. Special certificate from the Heavenly Law Palace. Holder, Xie Baishui? Why is this name so weird? Xie Baishui was obviously thanking Bai Shui for allowing him to snatch the 2 treasures. Suyu said calmly, "What can I do if my parents give me a name?" Humph. The black-robed man grunted. He took out a testing device and carefully examined the seal on Suyu's document. After examining it for a while, he put away the device and returned the document to Suyu. "All right, let's go." Suyu pointed at the golden python that was baring its fangs at him. "What's going on?" The black-robed man stared at him. "Something must have gone wrong. I suggest you change to another one. It would not be good if something like this happened when some big shot traveled in the future," Suyu said as he slowly walked out with his hands behind his back. When the golden python heard this, it was so angry that it hissed non-stop. It anxiously wanted to tell the black-robed man that he was the infiltrator who had escaped. Unfortunately, it was a combination of a treasure and a living being. It could not speak. The black-robed man did not understand. He frowned and said, "Someone, change this python. What if, as Suyu said, a big shot came in the future and this problematic python caused a commotion?" Yes. A group of stone guards immediately stepped forward and pulled the golden python down. The python screamed at the back of Suyu's departing figure, but no one could understand in the outside world. Looking at the pitch-black world, Suyu felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. "What happened to the python?" Mo Hing asked. Suyu smiled and shook his head. "Nothing much. I just taught it a small lesson." He took a step forward, heading toward the dilapidated civilization. "Can I ask for your help?" Suyu took out the nightmare-crossing lotus throne and sat on it. Mo Hing understood. "You want to absorb the primordial energy, right?" Don't worry, I will protect you. Su Yu thanked him. When I am done with my cultivation, I will give you 10% as repayment. He would not be able to use up so much primordial energy alone. There was no harm in thanking Mo Heng. Mo Heng's eyes flashed with desire. Thank you in advance. He had been imprisoned for many years, his cultivation stagnant. He really wanted to improve his abilities. Under Mo Heng's protection, Su Yu began to absorb the primordial energy. He took out the iron ball and gently sucked it in with his palm. The primordial energy flowed into his body through his skin like warm spring water. Instantly, his body was filled with unprecedented power. It was as if every muscle in his body was filled with power and trembled continuously. His cultivation level, which had been stagnant for a long time, also soared. Back then, the human ancestor had used his spine as a path to open a path to heaven for Su Yu, allowing his cultivation level to break through to the beginner level of the heavenly lawmaster. Now, under the nourishment of the primordial energy, his cultivation level soared once again. Half a day later, in the dark starry sky, there was a sudden gust of wind. A strange black cloud shrouded the sky. Lightning flickered inside, releasing a sharp and dangerous aura. Chapter 29:31. A middle-stage Heaven Law Master was not rare in a 9-star civilization. What was rare was that it would attract a terrifying heavenly tribulation. The heavenly tribulations of a 9-star civilization most often came from the Holy Mountain. Only when the will of the Holy Mountain strongly objected or wanted to suppress certain living creatures would such a situation occur. Rumble. What was even more shocking was yet to come. Not only did the heavenly tribulation lightning appear in the sky, but the shadows of stone statues also appeared. There were a total of 10 stone statues, each exceptionally majestic and huge. What? Shadow tribulation? Mo Heng gasped. The Holy Mountain Heaven's Sun had many forms of heavenly tribulations that needed to be suppressed, but the most powerful of them was certainly not the so-called lightning or fire tribulations. One of the most terrifying tribulations was the shadow tribulation. The so-called shadow tribulation was the descent of the projections of the 10 Holy Mountain Heaven's suns to prevent the suppressed living creatures from breaking through further. This tribulation could cause the tribulation taker's breakthrough to be interrupted in the worst case. Who the hell is this person? Mo Heng's eyes widened, his breathing quickening. He had thought that Su Yu was just a very powerful young man. Now it seemed that was clearly not the case. Su Yu was an existence that even the Holy Mountain had to suppress. Throughout history, there were only a handful of people who were qualified to be treated by the shadow tribulation of the Holy Mountain. All of them were peerless existences. As he pondered, the tribulation had already begun. First, a dense thunderbolt descended like a storm, wantonly destroying the absolute beginning energy that Su Yu had gathered around him. In order for Su Yu's cultivation to break through, apart from primordial energy, he also needed to absorb a large amount of external absolute beginning energy to transform his body. Otherwise, the breakthrough would definitely fail. The first step of the tribulation was to interrupt Su Yu's breakthrough. Its intentions were tyrannical. Mo Heng hesitated for a moment, resisting the urge to attack, and slowly withdrew from the range of the heavenly tribulation. The tribulation taker had to withstand the heavenly tribulation alone. If there was help from an outsider, the heavenly tribulation would sense it, and its power would increase exponentially. At that time, it would not just increase by 2 times, but by several times. That would only put Su Yu in a more dangerous situation. Rumble. The absolute beginning energy around Su Yu was dissipating at an alarming rate. Although he was in seclusion, he could see the situation in the outside world clearly. His nostrils flared, and an ancient oil lamp appeared above his head. Seeing this item, Mo Heng was shocked. A saint physique? The divine physique was a taboo existence in the 9-star civilizations because it was the mortal enemy of the sun of the Holy Mountain. For all eras, the divine physique was an existence that the son of the holy mountain wanted to get rid of. He finally understood why Su Yu had attracted the terrifying shadow disaster. As soon as the oil lamp appeared, it immediately emitted a 9-colored light that protected the surrounding primordial chi, preventing it from being dispersed by the lightning. As for the tribulation lightning, it crashed down, attempting to shatter the protection of the 9-colored light. However, it failed and was instead blocked by the 9-colored light. The heavenly tribulation did not stop. Instead, it became even more turbulent. The tribulation lightning in the dark clouds seemed to be free of charge as it continuously poured down. Hundreds of lightning bolts bombarded the light barrier without pause. Su Yu's oil lamp had absorbed a great deal of faith and was much stronger than before. However, it still couldn't withstand the indiscriminate bombardment of the disastrous thunder. Not long after, the flame of the oil lamp began to flicker, as if it was about to be extinguished. Su Yu, on the other hand, remained calm as he continued to advance his cultivation in an orderly manner. Strands of alpha origin chi entered his body through his pores, speeding up his cultivation breakthrough. Half an hour later, the light barrier released by the oil lamp had become much dimmer and was on the brink of collapse. However, Su Yu had already completed most of the process of his cultivation breakthrough. The light barrier was completely capable of supporting him until his cultivation finally broke through. As if the heavenly disaster had sensed this, the lightning gradually stopped. The world that had been filled with unceasing thunder finally quieted down. However, Mo Hing didn't feel that the heavenly disaster had passed. Instead, he understood that this was the true beginning of the heavenly disaster. The previous disastrous thunder was only a warning to Su Yu, forcing him to stop his breakthrough. However, Su Yu ignored it. The result was that the true heavenly disaster had descended. At that moment, the quiet dark clouds suddenly churned like boiling water. The projections of the 10 heavenly suns flickered, their solemn faces appearing in the layers of clouds. At the same time, an ancient and ethereal voice floated in the vast starry sky. Everything in the world nourishes man, but man has nothing to repay the heavens. Destroy the heavenly disciples, destroy the holy mountain. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 10 massive projections descended into the starry sky, blocking Su Yu's path. Su Yu sat cross-legged, quietly waiting for the final breakthrough. The light of the holy body condensed into a 9-colored giant that spanned across the sky. The outline of the giant was no different from Su Yu. 11 light and shadow giants faced each other in the dark starry sky. Holy mountain, what right do you have to call yourself the heavens after stealing from the great beginning realm? The giant projection's voice shook the starry sky. The great beginning realm is the great beginning realm of all things, not the realm of your holy mountain. What's more, your holy mountain kills all other creatures in every era. Only the 9-star creatures that submit to you can stay out of it. It's ridiculous that you still call yourself the heavens that bless the world. The 10 projections of the 10 heavenly suns remained solemn as they said in unison, "Destroy the heavenly disciples, destroy the holy mountain." Whoosh! The projections of the heavenly suns all moved, each displaying the heaven-crossing divine technique. Among them, there was the life and death of the 9-tailed heavenly sun, the stone mirror of Mirrorflower heavenly sun, and the ruler of Xiaoyao heavenly sun. The projection of the heavenly suns in the middle was the most powerful. It took out a palm-sized mountain, and when it was gently thrown out, it felt as if the world was pressing down. And this was just a projection of the holy mountain heavenly suns, not even a clone. However, the power of the collision was still extremely terrifying, close to the level of a great saint. As someone who had broken through to the peak of the early stage of the heavenly lawmaster, such a shadow tribulation was definitely a tribulation of death. Unfortunately, they encountered Su Yu, the great emperor of life and death. The body of the shadow of the 9-colored holy body suddenly dimmed and became petrified. Then, with a grasp of his palm, the great scythe of 10,000 tribulations appeared in his palm. The turbulent power of chaos poured into the great scythe of 10,000 tribulations, pushing it to its greatest extent. 10 golden skeletons slowly emerged. With a wave of Su Yu's hand, the destructive black light appeared out of nowhere. Even the ancient god Zhilong's tail was cut off, let alone the 10 shadows in front of him. Crack bang, the black light swept across everything, unstoppable. After all, the projections were only projections, and their power was limited. They were all wiped out. But the black light was also used up. Seeing that the techniques of the projections were ineffective, they performed seals together without any expression. Su Yu saw this, and his brows twitched slightly. He felt a sense of danger. It seemed that the 10 projections were joining forces to perform some very dangerous technique. Su Yu's eyes narrowed, and he took a deep breath, secretly activating the shadow of the holy body. The latter also performed a rather strange technique. His fingers drew several strokes in front of him, and the surface of his body sketched out marvelous trajectories. Chapter 29:32. He wouldn't understand that it was a move from the Ultimate Ruins divine tablet. Every move was the source of all the divine techniques of the 10,000 clans. Naturally, it was more powerful than the legacy of the Eagle clan. As soon as the trajectory appeared, it immediately set off a pitch-black residual shadow, like a giant eagle crossing the star region. The residual shadow was surrounded by lightning. That was because the residual shadow was too fast, and the friction with the atmosphere produced lightning. Whoosh! The residual shadow flashed away, and when the 10 projections were still condensing to attack, it rushed into the 10 projections first. Crash! With a loud noise, the 10 projections were destroyed by the residual shadow on the spot. This was once the most brilliant ancestral technique of the Eagle Saint clan. Of course, because Su Yu's cultivation was relatively low, its power was not obvious. However, it was more than enough to destroy the 10 projections. Mo Hing secretly marveled. He stared at Su Yu, feeling incredulous. The shadow tribulation was resolved just like that? No, according to the rumors, the shadow tribulation would not stop until it achieved its goal. As soon as this thought occurred to him, a mighty voice spread through the world. Sealing shadow. The broken 10 heavenly suns' shadows turned into nails, falling from the sky, covering the entire sky and covering the holy body projection. The projection once again displayed the ancestral technique of the Eagle Saint clan, and a residual shadow flew into the sky. However, the 10 Son of Heaven projections had all been destroyed. Those unknown steel nails had actually turned into countless afterimages as they fell down one after another. Su Yu's eyelids twitched, and he was hesitating whether to give up the breakthrough. Suddenly, he found that the nails did not cause much physical damage to the holy body projection. Instead, they all penetrated the body and fell to the ground. However, Su Yu did not feel at ease because of this. Instead, his eyebrows twitched even more, and he felt even more uneasy. Not good. Although he did not know what the so-called sealing shadow was, he must not let them succeed. Protection of faith. Su Yu growled, and with a stretch of his arms, a cavern world appeared in his sleeves. This was the world of faith that he had seized from the Lord of Nirvana with the help of Xing Yuanxin. After a period of cultivation, one of them had truly become his faith. At this moment, a substantial power of faith overflowed from the cavern world and spread on the ground. In this way, apart from the first 3 nails that successfully landed on the ground, the rest of the nails were intercepted by the power of faith. What happened next caused Su Yu's pupils to contract. After the power of faith was nailed, it was fixed on the ground forever, no longer obeying Su Yu's commands. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. He recalled the projection of the holy body and revealed his own shadow. 3 nails were nailed into his chest, the space between his eyebrows and his neck. Su Yu tried to move his body, only to discover that while his body could move, his shadow remained there, unable to move. Moreover, He felt intense pain in his forehead, neck, and chest. It was as if something was burning, and it was spreading to the rest of his body. A soul attack. Suyu immediately realized what was going on. That nail directly harmed the soul. The most vicious thing was that because the nails contained the aura of the sacred mountain's Son of Heaven, the damage to the soul was permanent and irreversible. Once one's soul was damaged, it would be difficult for one's cultivation to progress. Seeing that the nails were about to inflict damage on his soul, Suyu decisively severed all the souls that had been injured by the nails. With a sharp pain from his soul, his 3 souls were cut out by 2 nails and separated from his body. He had lost at least 10% of his soul strength. However, he successfully avoided permanent damage to his soul. The shadow tribulation dissipated, and the entire heavenly tribulation was completely over. The dark clouds in the sky quickly dissipated. Suyu's face was pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his face as he gasped for breath. Resisting the sharp pain in his soul, Suyu took a deep breath and forcibly completed the breakthrough of his cultivation. With a pop, the Taoist marks in his body were completely fulfilled. All the primordial energy outside his body flowed into his body and turned into the extremely pure power of the Master of the Heavenly Law. Suyu clenched his fists, and a feeling of controlling the world arose in his heart. It was as if he was standing on a completely different level before and after the breakthrough. He held the great scythe of 10,000 calamity and waved it toward the starry sky, and a destructive light swept out. In terms of power, it was more than twice as powerful as before. This was the benefit of the breakthrough of his cultivation. The power of all kinds of magical artifacts and divine techniques had been increased exponentially. It's a pity that my soul was damaged, and I don't know how long it will take to recover. Suyu was not without regret. At the same time, his eyes were filled with hatred. Holy Mountain Son of Heaven! In the past, when he was in an 8-star civilization, the Holy Mountain Son of Heaven could not control him. But it was different in a 9-star civilization. The first time he broke through in a 9-star civilization, he was suppressed by the Holy Mountain Son of Heaven. If he had not decisively destroyed his soul, his life would have been ruined. You should be content, Emohing said, the shock that had not yet faded from his face. Since ancient times, no one has ever escaped from the shadow tribulation. At the very least, their cultivation would be interrupted, and at the very worst, they would die on the spot. Look at you, only your soul was damaged. This kind of damage to the soul could be recovered, but compared to Suyu's gains, it was not worth mentioning. Suyu said proudly, "Shadow tribulation? Humph, sooner or later, I will become the great tribulation in the life of the stone embryo Son of Heaven." The hatred between him and the Holy Mountain Son of Heaven had long been irreconcilable, and could only be repaid with blood. Don't be too pleased with yourself, Emohing said profoundly. Emohing said meaningfully, for those who have been taken care of by the shadow tribulation, every time they break through, there will be an even more powerful tribulation descending, until the legendary Son of Heaven of the sacred mountain personally descends to stop your cultivation breakthrough. The Son of Heaven personally descends? Suyu's eyes narrowed. With his current cultivation level, he was no match for the Son of Heaven. But you don't have to worry too much, Emohing comforted him. Only if you reach the great saint level will you be able to attract the Son of Heaven's attention. With that, Suyu heaved a sigh of relief. When he reached the great saint level, there should be other opportunities. By then, he would not need to fear the Holy Mountain Son of Heaven. Let's go, Suyu said expressionlessly, keeping the great scythe of 10,000 calamity. Emohing stood in his original position, not moving. Are you not planning to kill me to silence me? I have personally witnessed your holy physique. A holy physique was a taboo existence in a 9-star civilization. Once discovered, one would be hunted down by the Holy Mountain Son of Heaven. Suyu calmly said, I don't think you are that foolish. Exposing me will only bring you harm. Mo Heng had nowhere to go. At the moment, Su Yu was the only person he could trust. There was no benefit in reporting him. Ha ha! Mo Heng could not help but laugh. It is so easy to get along with smart people. He looked at the great scythe of 10,000 calamity that Su Yu had just put away. Maybe I can help you increase the power of this scythe. Of course, that is if you trust me. What? The power of the great scythe of 10,000 calamity could be increased? Su Yu was excited. Chapter 29:33. The great scythe of 10,000 calamity was a peerless treasure made from the corpse of the Taotai ancestor that the holy mountain had killed. They had placed it among the 8-star civilizations and given it to the 8 great masters under their control to kill the powerful fighters who had prevented the holy mountain from destroying the world at the critical moment. Unfortunately, it had never been used, and it had instead become Su Yu's possession. Is the great scythe of 10,000 calamity not a finished product? Su Yu immediately took out the great scythe of 10,000 calamity and showed it to Mo Heng. Mo Heng shook his head. The crafting technique is rather crude. I think it was casually crafted by the heavenly masters. He pointed to the 10 heads on the scythe. The Taotai ancestor should have another head. Rumor had it that the Taotai ancestor had a total of 10 heads. One of them was the main head, and the other 9 were all subheads. There was actually an 11th head. The 10th head was a true world formed with the help of its master in the past, Mo Heng said slowly, revealing a secret that many people did not know. Su Yu was surprised. Are you talking about the Taichu Path Master? If it was the Taichu Path Master, it would not be strange at all. That Path Master was so powerful that he could do anything. You know the Taichu Path Master? Mo Heng felt that it was inconceivable. Not many people know of this name. I only found out about this legendary figure from the books passed down from generation to generation in the Sacred Sword clan. Almost no one in the 9-star civilizations knew of the Taichu Path Master. They only knew that it was the Holy Mountain and the 10 heavenly masters who informed them. It was also from that book that I found out that the Taichu Daolord had an extremely powerful pet called Tao Tai. Mo Heng took the great scythe of 10,000 calamity from the Taichu Path Master's hands. I also learned that the heavenly masters refined its corpse into the great scythe of 10,000 calamity. Mo Heng's eyes were filled with emotion. What a waste! Such a precious corpse was only refined into something like this. It is not even a tenth of the absolute heaven sword. If I had been the one to refine it back then, it would not have been inferior to the absolute heaven sword. Even if he were to refine it now, it would only have slightly improved the great scythe of 10,000 calamity. It would not have fundamentally changed the grade of the great scythe of 10,000 calamity. If you are at ease, leave it with me for half a year. 6 months later, I will give you a different great scythe of 1,000 calamity, Mo Heng said. Su Yu said, no problem. The scythe of 10,000 tribulations was a useless object in the hands of others. Only someone like him, who controlled half of the Son of Heaven's body, could activate most of its power. What harm was there in handing it over to Mo Heng? Without another word, the two of them rushed toward the dilapidated civilization. Several months later, when they were approaching the dilapidated civilization, Su Yu remembered Wencheng. At that time, because it was too dangerous, he had no choice but to keep it in the evil traversing lotus throne. With a tap of his finger, Wencheng appeared in a daze. He looked around at the dark stars and couldn't help but exclaim, "We're back!" She then glared at Su Yu bitterly. Liar! Liar! Tears welled up in her eyes, and she was full of grievances. You promised to show me around, but you locked me in a space storage device for half a year. Su Yu smiled. With a flick of his finger, a wisp of primordial energy shot into the space between Wencheng's brows. Immediately, Wencheng felt an extremely warm energy in his body, and it nourished his limbs and bones, causing his cultivation to skyrocket. Ah, what is this? Wen Cheng was surprised and delighted. She couldn't remember how many years it had been since her cultivation had improved. Sit down and train, Suyu said calmly. Wen Cheng immediately sat down with her legs crossed happily, waiting for her cultivation to break through. Several days later, a path of the heavenly law stretched across the vast sky. Wen Cheng opened her eyes and stepped on it, walking straight to the end. Her cultivation broke through to the early stage of the heavenly law master. Suyu's mouth twitched when he saw this. This was fate. In order to break through to the heavenly law master, Suyu had gone through a lot of trouble. When he walked on the path of the heavenly law, he was chased and intercepted by people from the holy mountain. In the end, even the path of the heavenly law was cut off by the holy mountain. If the human ancestor hadn't turned his spine into the heavenly law and helped Suyu complete his last journey, Suyu would probably still be a path master. Wen Cheng, on the other hand, could easily become the heavenly law master. However, the only thing he gained was that he still had a lot of similar primordial energy. Before this, he had only used 10% of it. Just now, he had only used a tiny bit of it, which was the remaining 10,000th of it. Even so, he could easily create a heavenly law master. If he used up all the remaining primordial energy, he didn't know how many more he could create. My biggest gain this time is probably the primordial energy, Suyu murmured. He took out 10% of the remaining 60% and put it in a jade bottle. This bottle was reserved for Xia Jingyu. She should also need the primordial energy. Thank you, Ruyu. Wen Cheng's face was flushed and full of excitement. She hugged Suyu's arm joyfully. Suyu withdrew his hand calmly and said, I have fulfilled my promise to show you the outside world. Wen Cheng nodded delightedly, her eyes flickering. I will never forget it. Her first long journey made her realize how prosperous the 9-star civilization was, how vast the starry world was, and how insignificant she was. Ruyu, will you leave me soon? Wen Cheng murmured to herself as she looked at the deep starry sky. Suyu was silent for a moment, then said, All good things must come to an end. He was very grateful to Wen Cheng for releasing him from the White Heavenly Book, and even more grateful to her for taking care of him. But the two of them would have to part sooner or later. After this trip to the dilapidated civilization, he would gather his people and enter the 9-star civilization. On the day of our separation, I will give you a gift. Wen Cheng bit her red lips as if she had made a decision. A gift? Suyu remembered it in his heart. Half a month later. Finally, the dilapidated civilization was close at hand. That dim, abandoned civilization gave the Wen Cheng family warmth. Before they arrived, City Master Wen Yuan had led a group of strong men from the dilapidated civilization to welcome them. Wen Cheng. Father. When the father and daughter saw each other, they could not help but hug and cry. Looking at the heartwarming scene, Suyu smiled and led Mo Heng away. In an abandoned corner of the dilapidated civilization, the roars of beasts could be heard. A petite girl was lying on a recliner made of animal skin. She was chewing on some heaven and earth treasures that would make ordinary people drool. Have you not eaten? Use more strength. That demonic beast, if you are not obedient, I will cook you tonight. And you, do you believe that I will cut off your balls and use them as a side dish? Suyu heard the shouting from afar. The veins on his forehead could not help but bulge. I asked you to train demonic beasts, not to learn how to cook. The petite girl jumped up from the recliner, exclaiming in surprise, Ah, you are back! She was none other than Xiao Dai. Her face was filled with joy, but she quickly realized that she should keep a straight face. Humph, so what if I am back? I am not happy. Chapter 2934. Suyu touched his chin. How did I change? You used to bring women back when you went out, but now you've brought a man back. Xiao Dai hugged her chest in disgust and said, Did you really change your sexual orientation after being a woman for so long? The more she thought about it, the more disgusted Xiao Dai became. She kept stepping back and said, But, if you want to change, then I can accept you. But, how could you like such an old man? You are no longer the Su Yu I know, Xiao Dai said with tears in her eyes. Su Yu clenched his fists and smiled stiffly. Do you know there are 4 big words on your forehead? Xiao Dai touched her forehead and said blankly, No. What words did you see? Su Yu laughed. I saw the words I want to get beaten up. Xiao Dai was startled, and then she covered her mouth and laughed. I'm just teasing you. Who asked you to leave for so long without bringing anything for me? Su Yu loosened his fists and said angrily, Who said I have nothing for you? He flicked his finger, and half a drop of primordial energy flew over. Xiao Dai was shocked, and her eyes opened wide. What a treasure! She was the most sensitive to treasures, and she immediately noticed the difference in the primordial energy. She flew over and opened her mouth, and the primordial energy was in it. Wow! It's a good treasure for improving cultivation, Xiao Dai said excitedly. Her cultivation could only improve by leaps and bounds through evolution. Therefore, since the last time she broke out of the cocoon, her cultivation had been stagnant and had not improved since. But the primordial energy was different. It was the purest energy in the world, and it was not inferior to the energy produced by evolution. It was more than enough for her to make a breakthrough. Moreover, what made Xiao Dai ecstatic was that this half-drop of primordial energy was equivalent to what she needed to evolve again. Su Yu, I love you so much. Xiao Dai sat down with her legs crossed happily, and immediately began to refine this drop of primordial energy. This breakthrough was equivalent to another evolution. Su Yu was worried. You won't evolve into an old woman this time, will you? Every time she evolved, Xiao Dai would grow a little bigger. Now that she was a young woman, she would become a middle-aged woman. Jinx! Xiao Dai puffed up her cheeks and rolled her eyes at him. I'm already an adult, so my appearance won't change much. What will evolve is only my cultivation and talent. Talent? Su Yu could not help but look forward to it. Xiao Dai's evolution had never disappointed him. Why? You don't want me to grow old? Little Butterfly said with a smile that was not a smile. Her flat chest even puffed up proudly. Su Yu said indifferently, You are thinking too much. You don't mean what you say. Xiao Dai rolled her eyes, then closed her eyes and began to guide the energy into her body. When Su Yu saw that he had started to train, he cut to the chase. Did anything special happen while I was away? In the ruins, the strong preyed on the weak, and there were dangers everywhere. While he was away, he was a little worried that some unknown force would covet it. It's very stable, Little Butterfly said, then slowly opened her eyes and said, To be precise, it's abnormally stable. In the past, the nearby civilizations would have disputes with this broken civilization every few days. If it's light, he'll resort to violence. If it's heavy, he'll lead troops to invade. But in the last 6 months, there hasn't been a fight or a quarrel. It seems that they haven't been here recently. In the past, the nearby civilizations would occasionally send caravans to buy things from this civilization. But recently, there hadn't been any. Su Yu couldn't help but be vigilant. There must be a reason for this, he said. Didn't you send someone to investigate? Yes. City Master Wen Yuan dispatched a team of strong men, and our Cauldron also sent Xing Yuanxin and a group of strong men, but there has been no news yet. Xiao Dai shrugged helplessly. Xing Yuanxin? Su Yu was a little surprised. Why did she go? Humph. Look at how distressed you are. She didn't want to be idle and wanted to do something for you, so she volunteered. I didn't harm her. Xiao Dai snorted. Su Yu was a little worried about Xing Yuanxin's safety. In the Tao Abyss, thanks to her stealing more than half of the Lord of Nirvana's faith, they had a chance to turn the tables. Otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable. In the end, before Su Yu could thank her, she took another risk. Don't worry, Xing Yuanxin and the people are all carrying the best escape treasures. If anything happens, they can definitely come back immediately. If that was the case, Su Yu was relieved. Moreover, he remembered that Xing Yuanxin seemed to have cultivated a very special divine technique. If one of herself died, another would immediately appear to replace her. It seemed to be called the six-path divine technique. I hope so, Su Yu murmured. You should train well. He turned and returned to the Wenyuan city master's manor to settle Mo Hing down. The environment of the broken civilization is like this. The path energy of the broken civilization was very weak, far inferior to that of a 9-star civilization. Don't say that. It's much better than being enslaved by the Sacred Sword tribe, Mo Hing said indifferently. I will be in seclusion for a few more months. When the time comes, I will definitely refine the great sickle of 10,000 calamity. Thank you. Su Yu cupped his fists and entered another secret chamber to begin his seclusion. He also had many things to do, one of which was to provide real documents for the people he was protecting. This stone statue would be taken back by the Palace of Heaven sooner or later. If he did not hurry to create more documents, there would be no more opportunities like this in the future. The number of people he protected was astronomical. Even with the help of various divine techniques, it was still a huge project. Su Yu beckoned with one hand and summoned the sinful lady and the other elites. With their assistance, he began to create the documents in an orderly manner. Time passed by in a flash. 2 months later, Su Yu had been creating documents day and night. Finally, he had issued brand new documents to the trillions of people. Even the cavern world of the faith he had seized was no exception. Every living creature had one. Because of this, many living creatures really had faith in Su Yu. After all, in their minds, the 9-star civilization was something they could only dream of. To be able to give them real documents was an honor bestowed by the heavens. Phew! Su Yu exhaled. The hand that was holding the stone statue was sore and swollen, and his face was covered with sweat. He looked at the stone statue in his hand again. Perhaps because of the continuous overload, there were cracks on the base. It could not be used for long in the future. It would be completely scrap. This time, he did not know how to explain it to Bai Shui. Right at that moment, a fragrant scent wafted over. The sinful lady was holding a handkerchief and gently wiping Su Yu's sweat. Her seemingly indifferent face was filled with tenderness. You work too hard, Su Yu said. Soon, the decisive battle with the Emperor is not far away. Once the Emperor was taken care of and the world returned to peace, he could live in seclusion and not care about the affairs of the world. Chapter 29:35. The message didn't come from him, but from Wen Cheng, who was in the room. Wen Cheng's expression was grave. She had several types of communication jade pendants with her, and different colors represented different emergencies. Looking at the blood-red emergency communication jade pendant in her hand, which was flickering incessantly, Wen Cheng had a bad premonition. There could only be one situation when the blood-red emergency communication jade pendant rang, and it was the most serious one among all the emergencies: the invasion of foreign enemies. Ruyu, there's an invasion of foreign enemies, Wen Cheng said hurriedly. Su Yu was slightly calm and said, I'm almost done with my work. I'll go out and take a look for you. He was also a little confused. The current dilapidated civilization had been unified by Wenyuan's city master, and its power was unprecedentedly strong. Unless it was an extremely powerful foreign enemy, it would be difficult to alert them to use the red communication jade pendant. The group of people walked out of the secret room, but the scene that greeted them was unexpected. The so-called invasion of foreign enemies, there was no trace of the enemy. Not even one. What they saw was an extremely shocking and bloody scene. Many blood-red skulls were tied to meteorite stones, and they fell on the dilapidated civilization like a meteor shower. Bang, bang, bang. Several meteors fell in front of the three of them. Looking at the bloody skulls, many people closed their eyes, unable to bear to watch. Su Yu took a look, and his eyes were cold. The eyes of these skulls retained the pain and extreme fear they had when they were alive. It was obvious that their heads had been chopped off while they were still alive. Moreover, there were extremely deep scars on the faces of some of the skulls, which showed that they had been tortured before they were alive. When he looked up, there were more than 1 billion meteors in the sky. It was almost more than the number of people he had saved from the 8-star civilization. At this moment, all of them had turned into a meteor shower, falling on the dilapidated civilization. Along the way, they brought up patches of bloody mist, dyeing the sky above the dilapidated civilization red. An extreme sense of oppression made the people of the dilapidated civilization feel uneasy. This is the city master of a neighboring civilization. When Qing suppressed her fear and looked at the skulls, but was surprised to find that she recognized one of them. And this one, he is an overbearing strong man from another neighboring civilization. He once had a dispute with our dilapidated civilization. Without exception, they were all people from nearby civilizations. That shouldn't be the case. The civilizations nearby are all very powerful. Could it be that they provoked some existence and were destroyed? Wen Qing did not feel happy. Instead, his mood was heavy. It was no wonder that during this period of time, no living beings from the neighboring civilizations came to the broken civilization. Even the people who came to trade normally did not exist. It turned out that they had all met with misfortune. It went without saying how terrifying an organization that could silently destroy all the nearby civilizations was. It seems like someone is warning us about something. The sinful lady narrowed her eyes. Su Yu replied expressionlessly, "It's not a warning but a gift." Gifts? Wen Cheng's body trembled. She had never heard of anyone giving such a gift. Is someone taking revenge on us? She was not stupid and immediately understood what the so-called gift meant. The sinful girl narrowed her eyes. I think it should be the Skeleton Legion. The only ones who had become enemies with them and had the ability to slaughter the nearby ruined civilizations were probably the fearsome Skeleton Legion. Su Yu nodded, confirming both women's guesses at the same time. It could only be the Skeleton Legion. Su Yu's eyes shone with a cold light. If the Skeleton Legion wanted revenge, they could come directly. What was the point of slaughtering all the living beings from the nearby civilizations? Did they want to intimidate Su Yu and make him live in fear? Or did they want him to regret killing 2 members of the Skeleton Legion? Actually, they would not. That would only make Su Yu more determined to exterminate the Skeleton Legion. It's been a long time since I went on a killing spree, Su Yu muttered. Although he had fought for a long time, he had not gone on a killing spree for a long time. However, the actions of the Skeleton Battle Group had triggered Su Yu's killing intent, which had been suppressed for a long time. He had never felt that people were necessarily good or bad. In the life of a good person, there would always be times when they did wrong. In the life of a bad person, there would also be times when the human heart would shine. Hence, he had never judged a person based on good or bad. But the Skeleton Legion had given Su Yu a deep sense of malice. What kind of heartless people could do such a thing? Su Yu felt that even if he killed all the members of the Skeleton Legion, none of them would be worthy of sympathy. Boom! At that moment, an extremely bright light streaked across the sky. It was a burning battleship. It was falling from the starry sky, heading straight for the city master's manor. It's coming for us. The sinful lady leaped up to intercept the battleship. She could feel that there was a dangerous energy within the battleship, and it was about to explode. She grabbed the railing of the battleship, stopping it from falling. Then, she pushed the battleship into the sky. As the battleship flew higher and higher, a strange light shot out from the battleship. It was a sign that the battleship was about to explode. The sinful lady glanced inside the battleship, her pupils dilating. The inside and outside of the battleship were filled with self-destruction formations carved with fresh blood. Every formation had living creatures nailed to it. Their methods were extremely cruel. Moreover, the formations were all revolving rapidly at that moment. They were on the verge of exploding. The sinful lady pushed the battleship back into the starry sky. Then, she quickly retreated. Just as she turned around, the battleship behind her exploded. An explosion wave that radiated half of the broken civilization swept through the starry sky. The sinful lady couldn't dodge in time. She was hit by the wave and immediately fell down. Her black clothes were completely burned, and the surface of her body was a bloody mess. Just a moment of shock had caused her such serious injuries. If she had retreated a little later, she might have been killed on the spot. When she was about to fall, Suyu leaped up and held the falling sinful lady in his arms. He immediately healed her injuries with the life domain. Looking at her body that was gradually recovering, he couldn't help but say, "Are you stupid?" She knew it was dangerous, but she didn't retreat as soon as possible. The sinful lady's injuries should have been extremely painful, but she didn't even frown. She tilted her head and pointed to the distance. "If you don't push it away, it will affect the demonic beasts you raised." It turned out that she was protecting Su-Yu's painstaking efforts. Su-Yu's heart was filled with warmth. Without saying a word, he instilled more life energy into her body. "Ryu, look." When Cheng suddenly thought of the scene of the battleship after the explosion. After the explosion wave subsided, a line of bloody words was left. Every word was glaring and hideous. It was as if it was written by an evil spirit from hell. Su-Yu stared at the bloody words and said slowly, "A debt of blood must be paid in blood." His eyes were filled with intense coldness. These 4 words were very good. It was great that the skeleton battle team had such awareness. Chapter 2936. The Skeleton Legion did not know who they were going to take revenge on, and who they were. They did not even know that they had dug a grave for themselves. Su-Yu, Xing Yuanxin and the rest have not returned yet. The sinful lady voiced out her worries. So many creatures from the nearby civilization had been imprisoned and killed. What about Xing Yuanxin and the rest, who had gone to investigate the situation? They had not sent back any news, and their safety was unknown. In fact, the sinful lady did not mention that Xing Yuanxin and the rest had most likely met with misfortune. At least, they had fallen into the hands of the skeleton battle group. Otherwise, they would have sent back some news when such a huge commotion had occurred in the outside world. The situation had become very bad. Su-Yu did not speak. How could he not have thought of this? The best-case scenario was that Xing Yuanxin had only been captured. The worst-case scenario was that Xing Yuanxin might have been tortured to death. Xing Yuanxin's head might have been among the gifts just now. "Send someone to investigate the location of the skeleton battle group," Su-Yu said calmly. No one could understand the meaning in his eyes. Only the sinful lady beside him could feel the murderous intent in his eyes. "All right. I will go myself. It will take at most 1 day," the sinful lady said. If anyone else went, they would not be able to guarantee their own safety. She was the only one who could guarantee her own safe return. "Be careful," Su-Yu said. In terms of strength, apart from him, the strongest person in the entire broken civilization was probably the sinful lady. The sinful lady went to investigate, while Su-Yu made some preparations. He returned to the secret room, took out the ultimate divine steel, and stared at the various divine techniques carved on it. After a moment, he took a deep breath, took out a drop of his own blood essence, and dripped it onto the ultimate divine steel. However, the drop of blood immediately bounced off, refusing to be refined by Su-Yu. It would be strange if the ultimate divine steel could be refined so easily. Su-Yu was not discouraged. He offered a drop of blood essence again, but it was still bounced off. However, Su-Yu persevered, trying again and again. The blood essence in his body was almost completely drained. However, Su-Yu still had no intention of giving up. Instead, he continued to try. At this moment, his face had already become incomparably pale due to the loss of blood, and his palms had begun to tremble. However, he did not want to give up. Stubbornness was the worst thing, and refining was no exception. Finally, hard work paid off. After hundreds and thousands of attempts, a drop of blood essence finally landed on the sinkhole divine steel. Although it was bounced off, a trace of blood miraculously entered the sinkhole divine steel. This could be attributed to the fact that Suyu had once controlled half of the returning ruins divine monument for a long period of time. It was only because of this that the returning ruins divine monument had a slight sense of belonging to him. Only then could he successfully integrate this trace of blood. Suyu slowly absorbed the blood essence that had been bounced off into his body. When his complexion returned to normal, he took a deep breath and started to transform the blood essence into a mark, which he then fused into the ultimate divine monument. Under the control of his mind, the strand of blood fused into the depths of the omniscient monument. Moreover, Suyu had to pay a huge price for every bit of it that he managed to fuse with it. In just a short while, Suyu's whole body was drenched in sweat, and his soul energy was depleted, so he had no choice but to stop and rest. Seeing that he was running out of time, Suyu used time acceleration. Under the state of time acceleration of 1,000 times, Suyu began to refine it day after day. And towards the end, the difficulty of the blood wisps fusing into the depths of the sinkhole divine monolith increased. Even after several months, the blood wisps didn't move an inch, and Suyu almost gave up. However, hard work paid off. When a whole day passed, under the state of time acceleration, it was like 3 whole years had passed. The strand of blood finally fused into the depths of the core of the omniscient monument. This meant that Suyu finally had a sliver of control over the omniscient monument. Just as the blood wisps fused into the core, Suyu's mind suddenly roared, and his soul fell uncontrollably into a chaotic world. The world was pale, and everywhere was a vast expanse of whiteness. It was like the depths of a pure white world that had nothing. Suyu was no stranger to such a world. This place was a deserted corner of the omniscient monument. Looking into the distance, the world was dark, and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Countless dangerous and strange creatures were walking about. Those were the energies of all kinds of creatures. Suyu was excited. The world of returning ruins. Xiener, Xiaoye, Han Xian, wizard ancestor. Their names appeared in Suyu's consciousness one after another. Could he bring them out of the world of returning ruins now? Filled with excitement, he flew toward the place where the creatures were. However, when he reached the border between the white world and the dark world, he was fiercely bounced back by an unknown force. Suyu staggered and was bounced back on the spot. However, the creatures in the dark world did not notice Suyu at all, as if he had never appeared. After many attempts, Suyu found that although he had come to the world of returning ruins, he was confined to the white world, and he could not establish any communication with the creatures inside. To be precise, what Suyu saw was not a creature, but the energy of a person who had returned to the void. It was like Suyu's past self. In a trance, Suyu seemed to see a bamboo forest, a thatched cottage, and a beautiful girl who claimed to be his wife. Suyu hammered the barrier at the border, his heart aching. "Wait for me, I will bring you back sooner or later." Suyu closed his eyes in pain. When he opened them again, his consciousness returned to his body. He had a general understanding of the situation just now. He had indeed refined the omniscient monument of the returning ruins, but only a very small part of it. The white world was Suyu's territory in the omniscient monument of the returning ruins. However, because the refined part was too small, it was actually separated from the world of returning ruins. Not to mention affecting the world of returning ruins, he could not even be noticed by the energy of the world of returning ruins. However, this told Suyu that refining the omniscient monument could indeed allow him to enter the world of returning ruins. Of course, Suyu's original intention of refining the omniscient monument was not to save Xiener and the others. Instead, he was eager to deal with the upcoming skeleton battle. He held the omniscient monument of the returning ruins, and with a thought, he controlled the monument to fly into the air. The engravings on the monument flickered with flickering light, as if it could be moved at Su Yu's command at any time. The engravings on the monument were derived from the Taichu Dao mark. Although the explosive power was not as great as the Taichu Dao marks, it was still extremely terrifying. Once it was used, it would certainly cause great damage to the skeleton battle. Beep beep. His communication jade pendant vibrated, and Su Yu immediately opened it. It was a message from the sinful lady. She did not disappoint, as she had already confirmed the location of the skeleton battle. However, apart from the location information, there was another piece of information, which was that there was an extremely powerful being among the skeleton battle, comparable to the ancient god Jiulong. In the past, the creatures of the 8-star civilizations all regarded the ancient god Jiulong as an existence comparable to the carefree son of heaven. Chapter 29:37. But in reality, from Su Yu's fight with the powerful fighters of the 9-star civilization, he could roughly deduce that ancient god Jiulong's abilities were at the great saint level. That was the second stage of the late-stage master of the heavenly law, far from the level of Emperor Xiaoyao. In other words, there was a great saint-level fighter in the skeleton battle group. Unbelievable! Su Yu murmured. A great saint has become a wanderer, leading a motley crew to kill and plunder. A great saint-level fighter was a figure in a 9-star civilization who could cause the earth to tremble with just a stamp of his foot. Such a figure was not in a 9-star civilization, but in a barren starry sky. Moreover, according to the records, the skeleton battle group's appearance was extremely mysterious. It seemed to have appeared overnight and quickly became a dark force that intimidated the entire starry sky. Su Yu's eyes narrowed. There is something wrong with this skeleton battle group. He put away the divine tablet of the returning ruins, looked at the location in the message, and left. Just as he was about to go to the skeleton battle group to find Xing Yuanxin and the others, a sea of people had already gathered outside the city master's manor. The city master was trying his best to calm them down, but to no avail. To be precise, they were not panicking, but angry. Every debt has a debtor. Get that bastard out of the broken civilization. Get Su Rushu out of the broken civilization. He should take responsibility for the people he killed. Why should we be implicated? City Master, please stop sheltering that murderer. Hand him over to the skeleton battle group, and we will all be safe. The huge gift from the skeleton army had truly scared the living beings of the broken civilization out of their wit. They had nowhere to run, and the fear in their hearts was magnified. They vented all their anger on the culprit Su Yu. They felt that Su Yu had killed the members of the skeleton battle group. As the saying went, every debt has a debtor. Since it was Su Yu's doing, he should bear the responsibility himself and not implicate the innocent living beings. City Master Wenyuan comforted them. Everyone, you can't say that. The members of the skeleton battle group came to our broken civilization to commit crimes. Su Rushu could have just stood by and watched, but why did he intervene? Could it be that he had nothing better to do? Could it not be that he hated evil and felt injustice for all of you? Now, the skeleton battle group came for revenge, and you pushed him out? What is this? Are you heartless and ungrateful, or are you biting the hand that feeds you? The immense fear made it so that ordinary beings didn't even think about it seriously. In order to survive, all sense of propriety, justice, and honor had collapsed in an instant. Moreover, as vagrants, they were either sinners themselves, or how much awareness could they have after becoming a sinner? Nonsense! The crowd retorted fiercely, we didn't ask him to do anything. He was the one who meddled in our business and caused trouble. Why shouldn't he take responsibility? Yeah. Didn't the skeleton group not do anything? What if they just came and left? It was originally fine, but he poked a hornet's nest the moment he made a move. That's right, he must pay for his recklessness. The excitement of the crowd drowned out the voice of the city lord. The people had already lost their rationality, lost their ability to think. City Lord Wenyuan felt extremely sorrowful, extremely angry. They were all lying to themselves. Since when did the members of the Skeleton Legion not cause a massacre after appearing? Back then, if Su Yu had not killed the 3 powerful members of the Skeleton Legion, the dilapidated civilization would have become a graveyard long ago. Now, after they chased Su Yu away, would the Skeleton Legion let go of the dilapidated civilization and only target Su Yu? Dream on. With the Skeleton Legion's ferocious reputation, the dilapidated civilization would definitely not be spared. Without the protection of a strong martial artist like Su Yu, the dilapidated civilization would only be destroyed faster and more thoroughly. You are all muddle-headed, City Lord Wenyuan shouted in pain. Unfortunately, the living beings couldn't hear him. They only wanted to hand Su Yu over, firmly believing that they would be lucky. He was about to shout, but Su Yu appeared without anyone noticing, patting his shoulder. Don't waste your energy. People only want to believe in what they believe. Did they not understand the bloodthirsty style of the Skeleton Legion? Not only did they know, they had also seen it. Even the innocent nearby civilizations had been massacred by the Skeleton Legion, all of them brutally tortured to death. How could the dilapidated civilization have been spared? They were just being lucky. After handing Su Yu over, the Skeleton Legion would change their minds. They were simply lying to themselves. Elder Su. The city lord immediately cupped his fist. He was extremely grateful to Su Yu. Not only had Su Yu saved Wenyuan City, but he had also saved his father and daughter. Su Yu had even generously gifted his daughter with the precious primordial energy. Su Yu's kindness was greater than the heavens, and the city lord respected Su Yu greatly. Hence, he had stood his ground and protected Su Yu. Su Yu smiled. Go down and rest. But they. City Lord Wenyuan looked at the boundless crowd of living beings, scanning their fearful and ferocious gazes. He was extremely worried. They did not have the slightest bit of kindness toward Su Yu. Su Yu waved his hands. No matter. Go and take stock of those who are willing to follow me. Also, take care of all the things that can be taken away. His words were very clear. He was leaving, no longer caring about the lives of the living beings of the dilapidated civilization. He did not conceal his words. He had said them in front of all the living beings of the dilapidated civilization. Many of the living beings revealed a sliver of fear in their eyes. If you want to leave, leave by yourself. Why are you taking the city lord and the rest with you? That's right. If the city lord is gone, what are we going to do? If you want to leave, leave by yourself. The crowd shouted angrily, as if they were in the right. It was as if someone was born to protect them. Ignorant and foolish. Su Yu shook his head. This was how blind living beings were. They forcefully placed their hopes on others, regardless of whether that person was obligated to bear the responsibility. Su Yu looked at them and said, Why should I take them with me? Because you are not worthy of my protection. If you can hand me over today, you can hand over the city lord tomorrow. The day after that, you can hand over the rest of the people who helped you. I will be abandoned by you sooner or later. Why should I stay and protect you for free? No one owes you anything, and no one needs to protect you. As he spoke, he released the powerful cultivation of a middle-stage heavenly law master, which was extremely intimidating. From now on, take care of yourselves. I will leave immediately. Su Yu turned around, leaving behind the living beings who had fallen into an even greater panic. Su Yu shook his head slightly. These living beings had no faith. The only faith they had was himself. They were not worthy of Su Yu's help. City Lord Wenyuan looked reluctant and said, Senior Su, Su Yu waved his hands and said, I only help those who need help. They no longer need me, so why should I help them? Looking at the sky, he said, I will only give you 2 hours to prepare. Chapter 29:38. What could 2 hours do? Wouldn't it take more than an hour to send a message to the entire broken civilization? But seeing Su Yu's serious expression, the Wenyuan city master did not dare delay. He immediately ordered his trusted aides to make the announcement to the outside world. He hurriedly went to pack his things, trying to bring the most important things with him. Seeing that the city master was really going to abandon them, the ferocious creatures were all agitated. They were panicking and angry, as if they had been greatly wronged. Wenyuan City Master, we saw you as the new hope of the broken civilization and agreed to merge with Wenyuan City. But now you are abandoning us. Are you worthy of our trust in you? Similar voices could be heard from the crowd. Wenyuan City Master heard them, no longer struggling in his heart. He had already seen through these so-called citizens. They were asking him, the city master, to contribute as if it was a matter of course. But if there was trouble, he would be pushed out mercilessly like Su Yu. Seeing through this, Wenyuan City Master was expressionless. He gathered all those who were willing to leave with him. Most of them were former residents of Profound Learning City, and they had deep trust in the city lord. So they immediately followed the summons. Time passed slowly. Just as they were packing their things, a voice came from beyond the heavens. Hand over the culprit, and we will let bygones be bygones. Resistance will only lead to death. The crowd looked up to see a small golden boat slowly descending into the broken civilization under the protection of several strong fighters from the Skull Team. On top of the small boat stood a person with a cold expression. He was none other than Xiao Yan. She was the one who had led the Skull Team back to the broken civilization to take revenge for the sins she had once suffered. At this moment, looking at the surging emotions of the broken civilization, she was very satisfied with the result. The reason why these living creatures had been incited to denounce Su Yu was not without reason. She had contacted the old officials of the first city, and with their secret instigation, this great denunciation had come. Their goal was to chase Su Yu out of the broken civilization so that they could kill him. Secondly, if they did not chase Su Yu away, wouldn't it be very troublesome to destroy the broken civilization? Looking at the surging crowd below, Xiao Yan laughed coldly in her heart. What a bunch of pigs! She had returned to take revenge on Su Yu and Wenqing, and to destroy the civilization that had witnessed her humiliating history. Xiao Yan, City Lord Wenyuan, Wenqing, and the others were all surprised. When Xiao Yan was captured by the Skeleton Legion, he actually did not die. From the looks of it, he had become a rather important person in the Skeleton Legion. What's wrong? Are you surprised? Xiao Yan seemed to be smiling, and there was an indescribable viciousness hidden in his smile. The Profound Knowledge City Lord spoke in a serious tone. Xiao Yan, don't try to mislead us with your lies. You know very well what kind of people the Skeleton Squadron is. They will not let go of a broken civilization. Xiao Yan stared at City Lord Wenyuan's nervous expression and let out a breath of turbid air. What, are you afraid? Since you're afraid, then hand Su Yu over. Otherwise, the Skeleton Legion's army will soon arrive and kill all of you. As soon as these words came out, all living beings fell into a complete panic. City Lord Wenyuan, quickly hand Su Yu over. Are you trying to get us all killed? You muddle-headed City Lord, you still refuse to come to your senses. Quickly hand him over. The crowd roared hysterically, as if they had seen their last hope. City Lord Wenyuan was unmoved, coldly saying, "A bunch of fools." Looking at the crowd of angry, ignorant living beings, City Lord Wenyuan knew that he could not stay any longer. Who knew what the instigators would do to them? Stop packing and leave immediately, City Lord Wenyuan shouted. The people who had followed him immediately gathered around Su Yu, ready to leave at any moment. The angry living beings had already begun to destroy the City Lord's manor, forcing their way in and surrounding them. All of them looked as if they had a huge grudge against Su Yu. Luckily, even though they had the advantage in numbers, Su Yu's abilities were still fresh in their minds, and they did not dare attack. Xiao Yin laughed coldly. If she continued to force them, she believed that she could easily force Su Yu and the rest out. But she did not intend to do so. Since she was here for revenge, she would take revenge to the end. Wen Qing, do you think you can escape alive? Xiao Yin suddenly locked her gaze onto Wen Qing. The latter's expression changed slightly. To be honest, Wen Qing did not have the slightest bit of confidence, even though he had seen how extraordinary Su Yu's attacks were. However, what they were facing now was the world-famous skeleton battle group. Now that the living beings of the broken civilization were all out to attack Su Yu, they had no intention of working together. How could Su Yu and them, who were weak, resist the skeleton battle group? It was very likely that they would end up like the countless heads. I will give you and your father a chance to live. Xiao Yin was smiling, but she was laughing maliciously in her heart. Wen Qing had always been wary of Xiao Yin. What chance? She asked weakly. She could already imagine what Xiao Yan's request would be. It would probably be for her to kneel down in front of everyone, kowtow, and admit her mistake. Xiao Yan had always been a self-centered woman. She must want her to admit her mistake now, right? But Xiao Yan's reply caused Wen Qing's face to turn red. She was furious. Very simple. Take off your clothes and let the living beings of the broken civilization see their fill. Xiao Yin could not help but recall her nightmarish memory of being possessed by Marquis Wolf. That was a pain that she could not erase for the rest of her life. All of this originated from Wen Qing and Su Yu. Thus, she wanted Wen Qing to suffer the same humiliation. Only then could she alleviate a portion of the hatred in his heart. Wen Qing was furious. You shameless woman! She clenched the front of her clothes, weakly shouting. How could she do such a thing? Then I'm sorry, but you and your father will both have to die. Xiao Yin said coldly. When your father's corpse falls in front of you, you will regret it. You sacrificed your father for a piece of clothing. What an unfilial daughter! Wen Qing clenched her fist. This kind of fallacious reasoning sounded very reasonable, but in reality, it was a complete mess. But she had to admit that if her father really died because of this, she would feel guilty. I'll give you one more chance to consider. Do you agree or not? Xiao Yin said. The surrounding living beings became much quieter, especially the male living beings. They all looked toward Xiao Yin. Some of them even had a hint of schadenfreude, anticipation, and passion. Although Wen Qing was not particularly beautiful, her status was incomparably respected, and she was as pure as ice and clean as jade. To be able to see her naked body was a rare treat for the eyes. Chapter 29:39. Wen Qing was encouraged. Indeed, did she really expect Xiao Yin to keep her promise and release her father? The answer was obviously no. Isn't it just death? What's the big deal? I'll die with my father. It's better than you living alone in this world. Wen Qing said, mustering her courage. Xiao Yin wanted to humiliate them but failed. His eyes were filled with hostility, and his viciousness increased instead. Fellow people of the broken civilization, Wen Yuan and his daughter have persecuted the common people and disregarded your lives. They are heartless and unjust. On behalf of the skeleton group, I promise you that anyone who can obtain the first drop of Wen Qing's blood and obtain her body will be pardoned. Not only that, but we will also give you a city's worth of resources. What? The living creatures were excited. Not only would they be spared from death, they would also be given the resources of a city. Did that not mean that they could become a city master overnight? The living creatures stared at Wen Qing like hungry wolves. The meaning in their eyes was self-evident. If not for Su Yu, they would have already pounced forward and torn Wen Qing to pieces. Are you still not going to act? Xiao Yin said. I will only give you 10 breaths of time. She laughed sinisterly. She wanted to see Wen Qing suffer the same pain and despair that she had suffered. As for Su Yu, he could only watch, unable to change a thing. She did not believe that Su Yu would be able to contend with the living creatures of the broken civilization. As soon as she said this, the living creatures could no longer hold themselves back. They all charged forward with bloodshot eyes. Brothers, the city master and his daughter have let us down. Take down Wencheng, we will fight for our lives. Amidst the roars, the living creatures were finally moved. They surged forward like a tide. City master Wen Yuan was shocked. Quick, take Wencheng and leave first. I will hold them off. With a push of his palm, he pushed Wencheng into Su Yu's arms while he stood in front. He had already prepared himself for the worst. He wanted to protect his only daughter. At this moment, he had seen through this group of so-called living creatures. Just as Su Yu had said, when the time came, he could immediately abandon the city master. Wasn't his daughter the best proof of that? What was there to protect about such a living creature? However, what made City Master Wen Yuan feel a chill was that Su Yu had no intention of leaving. He merely pulled Wencheng to his side. Then, he unhurriedly extended his finger and pointed at the living beings that were swarming over from all directions. His eyes were cold as he said, I'll give you one last chance. Scram and leave my sight forever. It was a pity that the bewitched creatures didn't take Su Yu seriously because they had the advantage in numbers. Brothers, we have the advantage in numbers. Don't be afraid. Charge. Whoever obtains Wencheng first will be the next city lord. The only sound in the crowd was the morbid cries. Su Yu closed his eyes and calmly said, I've already given you a chance. He spun on the spot and swept his fingers in all directions. Puff, puff. All the creatures in the surroundings exploded into a mist of blood. Within a radius of 10,000 li, apart from his own people, everyone else was flattened into a bloody mist. The creatures that were pouncing over felt their scalps go numb when they saw this. They all stopped and didn't dare to take another step forward. What is his strength? He actually slaughtered innocent people. It's intolerable. It's intolerable. As they spoke, they retreated as if 10,000 li away was a safe zone. Su Yu didn't speak. He swept his eyes around again. Puff. This time, all the living beings within 100,000 li exploded into a mist of blood, leaving nothing behind. The deafening cries finally stopped for the most part. The creatures that were 100,000 li away looked at the endless sea of blood and finally felt the fear that came from their souls. No matter how they were incited before, at this moment, they were frantically fleeing in horror. No one dared to complain anymore, and no one dared to reprimand Su Yu. At this moment, they finally realized that their lives were insignificant in Su Yu's eyes. They were like dust. Su Yu had never been a kind person, let alone anyone's protector. In the blink of an eye, the many creatures retreated like a tide, and no one made a racket. Su Yu retracted his finger and said lightly, It's finally quiet. He didn't make a move, and these creatures thought he was afraid of them. They didn't know that it was just Su Yu restraining himself. Unfortunately, they kept challenging Su Yu's bottom line. After killing all the troublemakers, Su Yu looked up at Xiao Yan in the sky and said lightly, Enemies aren't scary, but traitors are. Xiao Yan sucked in a breath of cold air. She knew that Su Yu was powerful, but she never thought that he was powerful enough to destroy countless lives with a single finger. Moreover, he was cruel and merciless without mercy. Her soft body trembled, and without a word she steered the small boat away. As she walked, she crushed a life-saving treasure. Su Yu's eyes shot out, and two solid rays of light, like sharp swords in the sky, easily shattered the small boat. The strong skeletons near the small boat turned into a mist of blood in an instant. Xiao Yan was extremely lucky. She activated the life-saving treasure at the critical moment, leaving only a substitute stone on the spot, and successfully escaped. Su Yu rose into the air and let go of the lotus seat of evil crossing. Go in, all of you. I'll let you out when it's safe. City Master Wen Yuan and the others immediately led their people in, leaving Su Yu alone. He closed his eyes, and with a thought, he traversed the boundless Milky Way, reaching a faraway place. In just a few short hours, he appeared near the dilapidated civilization. On one of the dilapidated civilizations, the sinful lady's figure flickered. She pointed at the dilapidated civilization. This is the civilization closest to us, the Black Water civilization, the stronghold of the skeleton troop. Black Water civilization? What Suyu saw was a blood-red civilization. Without a doubt, it was dyed red by the blood of countless lives. Gather all the demonic beasts that we have tamed and guard this place. Unless the great sage-level skeleton troop leader appears, kill everyone else. Leave no one alive. All right, the sinful lady said expressionlessly. She was also extremely disdainful of the skeleton troop's outrageous actions. It was better to completely destroy such an extremely evil creature. Suyu clasped his hands behind his back and entered the Black Water civilization. The moment he stepped in, he saw an endless number of corpses. Most of them had lost their heads. Not far away, the members of the skeleton troop were searching the corpses for valuables. Suyu could not be bothered with these small fries. He released his powerful soul, enveloping the entire dilapidated civilization. At the same time, his soul energy vibrated, and a sharp soul voice was transmitted into the ears of every living being. Come out and receive your death. Chapter 2940. Black Water Civilization, on an island with a sea of blood floating. A black-robed man wearing a skull mask was currently training a secret technique amidst a pile of corpses. In front of his chest was the blood of the 10 strongest experts of the Black Water Civilization. Under the activation of a secret technique, a blurry remnant mark was extracted from the blood. Only this much? The experts and ancestors of the Black Water Civilization are too weak. He was none other than the leader of the Skull Unit, Guy Tianmo. Guy Tianmo frowned slightly, his eyes filled with disappointment. He then took out a jade bottle. Inside the jade bottle, there were half a bottle of similar remnant marks. Some were extremely blurry, some were clear. He placed the blurry remnant mark into the bottle, looking at the half bottle of remnant mark. Guy Tianmo sighed. I still have a long way to go. This is only half a bottle. It is far from what old ancestor wants. So there is someone else behind Guy Tianmo. For so many years, he had led the Skull Unit to kill and plunder in the starry sky. It was not a baseless rumor. The Skull Unit's evil deeds were only on the surface, causing others to think that the Skull Unit was only cruel. But in truth, the Skull Unit's true goal was to extract the unique remnant mark from the bodies of the Wanderers. In the recent era, the Skull Unit had killed countless of living beings, and had obtained a portion of the remnant mark, but it was still far from what they wanted. The expert who took away my demon beasts, he should not disappoint me, right? Guy Tianmo muttered. He was extremely interested in the expert that he had never met before. He estimated that the person who was able to take away all of his demon beasts would at least surpass the ancient Saint Realm. Although there were many experts in the starry sky, but there were only a few that surpassed the ancient Saint Realm. Right at that moment, a loud and clear voice came out from his soul. To ordinary living beings, the voice would cause immense pain, but to a great sage like him, it only caused a slight tremor. Oh? Yuan Realm Soul Domain? Guy Tianmo was slightly surprised. As a great sage expert, he was able to see through the clues. From the other party's soul power, Guy Tianmo could sense that the other party's soul had reached the Yuan Realm. Seems like he truly did not disappoint me. Guy Tianmo sneered and stood up, playing with the jade bottle in his hand. The remnant mark within, along with the turbulence, shook continuously, revealing rays of sharpness. If Suyu was here, he would not be unfamiliar with it. It was not for nothing, it was the ancestral technique remnant mark on the returning ruins divine monument. But the remnant mark within the bottle was extremely shallow, as though it was an imitation. However, there shouldn't be a need for me to do anything, Guy Tianmo said lightly. With his strength, of the ancient saints could be killed with of them. Let them practice, Gai Tianmo murmured. Speaking of which, Xiao Yan had narrowly escaped death, and returned with a panicked expression on his face. Lord Sage. Where of saints she came, Su demon, saint of. She wanted to tell Gai Tianma that Su Yu's strength was beyond imagination. Su of. Xiao Yan hurriedly retreated and said respectfully, My lords, it is about that strong man. I believe that Lord Gai Tianmo would like to know. She did not dare to act rashly. The 3 guards in front of her were the close confidants of Gai Tianmo. They were extremely mysterious. It was said that the 2 hall masters, who had been killed by Su Yu, did not even dare to breathe in front of the 3 guards. It was still unknown how strong they were. For many years, almost no one had seen them in action. The only thing they knew was that, if there was a difficult bone to chew, they would attack. Often, no one knew how they attacked, and those hard bones were killed in a very short time. The most sensational was once, in a large civilization, there were several ancient saints. The Skull Group did not know about it and went to invade. As a result, they were killed by several reclusive ancient saints. They suffered heavy casualties, and nearly 1/10 of the Skull Group's combat power was wiped out. At the critical moment, the 3 mysterious guards appeared. After just half an hour, they came back with the heads of the 3 ancient saints. Since then, the 3 guards had become the taboo existence of the Skull Group, second only to Gai Tianmo. Everything will wait for Gai Tianmo to come out, the 3 guards said expressionlessly. They did not take Su Yu seriously. But at that moment, Gai Tianmo's voice came from inside. You go. Among the 3 guards, the only female guard turned around and bowed to the secret room. Yes, Lord Gai Tianmo. Stood up expressionlessly and took a step out. Xiao Yan hurriedly retreated, her heart quickly calming down. Was the weakest among the 3 guards, but she was more than enough to deal with Su Yu. As for you, Xiao Yan, clean up the last batch of captives, Gai Tianmo said. Xiao Yan said respectfully, Yes, Lord Gai Tianmo. Watching Xiao Yan leave, Gai Tianmo laughed coldly. This woman has no other skills, but she is cruel and merciless. Many of the captives and people who were beheaded were personally killed by Xiao Yan. In terms of viciousness, there were not many women who could beat her. Xiao Yan came to the formation where the captives were imprisoned. She divided the captives into 2 types. One was from the surrounding civilization, and the other was from the broken civilization. The captives from the broken civilization were all wealthy merchants who passed by or strong men who came to explore the way. Xiao Yan ordered the beheading of the creatures from the surrounding civilization. However, Xiao Yan did not kill any of the people from the broken civilization. Instead, she tortured them one by one until they could neither live nor die. This was especially true for the creatures from Wenyuan City. The arrival of Xiao Yan made the creatures of Wenyuan City in the formation turn pale, and they all retreated. Those who had not been tortured were even more terrified. Xiao Yan sneered coldly. My fellow countrymen, I am here again. Her beautiful eyes swept back and forth among them, looking for the next target. Most of the people were retreating frantically, for fear of being targeted by Xiao Yan. Only one person did not change her expression. Her face still maintained a tranquil expression, without fear. She only looked at her quietly with a pitiful gaze. Xiao Yan immediately noticed her, and her eyes narrowed. What is your name? The tranquil woman did not say a word, but only looked at her with pity. That gaze made Xiao Yan very uncomfortable, and a trace of hostility flickered between her brows. Pull her out. 2 guards immediately rushed in and dragged the woman out. Xiao Yan said coldly, Let me ask you, why are you looking at me like that? The woman looked calm and said, Because you are going to die soon. Bang! Xiao Yan kicked the woman's abdomen, and the latter bent over in pain, but the pity in her eyes deepened. Why? Xiao Yan said coldly. Chapter 29:41. The woman was none other than Xing Yuanxin. As one of the people who knew Su Yu best, Xing Yuanxin was almost certain that Xiao Yan would not have a good ending. This was because, throughout history, no matter who it was, all of Su Yu's enemies had the same ending. There was no exception. Even if their cultivation was many times stronger than Su Yu's, they would eventually fall at Su Yu's feet. Xiao Yan had barely escaped death, but he insisted on coming back to take revenge on Su Yu. In Xing Yuanxin's eyes, he was courting death. Oh? You mean Su Yu? Xiao Yan squinted his eyes as he stared at Xing Yuanxin. A malicious smile bloomed on his lips. It seems like I am very lucky. On the other side, Su Yu stood in the center of the Blackwater civilization, scanning the surroundings. His soul was rapidly searching the entire civilization for Xing Yuanxin's whereabouts. Suddenly, his eyebrows twitched. A powerful aura appeared within the range of his soul perception. He opened his eyes and stared at the sky. A figure was approaching like a rainbow. It was a woman, but her cultivation was as strong as a late ancient saint. In terms of strength, she was much stronger than Bai Shui. Not only was there a Gai Tian demon, but there was also a strong ancient saint. What was the skeleton group looking for in the ruins of this ruined civilization? Ying landed and looked at Su Yu in front of her. She was disappointed. I thought it would be someone powerful, but it turns out to be a lowly human. No wonder Lord Gai Tian Demon thought I could handle this alone. Ying removed the crescent moon scimitar from her arm. The scimitar was pitch black, glistening with a green poisonous fog. The poisonous fog was no ordinary poison. It was an intense poison that was specially designed to subdue late-stage heavenly law masters. Once the wound was cut, even if it was just a small cut, it would be enough to paralyze a late-stage heavenly law master. The number of ancient sages that Ying had killed with this artifact was in the double digit. Let's finish this quickly. Ying waved her hand, and the full moon scimitar turned into a fragmentary line as it flew toward Su Yu, leaving a jet-black trail in its wake. Then, the line split into 2, 2 into 4, and 4 into infinity. In a short moment, it turned into a giant net that covered the sky. It completely sealed off the space where Su Yu was, making it impossible for him to escape. Su Yu looked up and stretched out a finger. He gathered the strength of his holy body and blasted it out. With the strength of his sacred body, he should be able to shatter the entire net. However, the giant net merely shook for a moment before stabilizing itself and pouncing forward at an even faster speed. Su Yu was slightly surprised, and he displayed his 8 great domains once again. However, when his domain power struck the giant net, the same thing happened. Not only did his domain power disappear without a trace, but the giant net actually grew a bit stronger. Finally, Su Yu understood everything. The poison contained in the giant net actually had another extremely mysterious function, which was to dissolve the enemy's power and turn it into a part of the giant net. The stronger the enemy's resistance, the stronger the giant net would be. Finally, when it enveloped the enemy, it was enough to kill them in one move. Accept your fate. Don't waste your energy, Ying said calmly. She had already killed many ancient sages with this move. Many of them possessed peerless divine abilities or peerless treasures. However, under her crescent moon scimitar, they all turned to dust. Su Yu said expressionlessly, "There's another one who looks like him." He had initially thought that the Skull Unit was just a motley crew, but who knew that beneath the demon Gai Tian, there was another powerful existence. However, no matter how powerful she was still at the level of an ancient sage. If she was a great saint, he would still be a little afraid. Unfortunately, she was not one. Su Yu raised his finger and drew a scar on his chest. The scar was filled with an extremely mysterious concept, as if it contained the essence of some kind of divine technique. Creak, indistinctly, it seemed like a giant eagle's claw streaked across the sky. The giant net, which had absorbed all energy, was split into 2 from the middle, and was completely torn apart. Su Yu stood at his original position, not moving an inch. The torn giant net brushed past Suyu. What? Ying's cold and stiff face was suddenly filled with shock. The move that she was most proud of had actually been broken? She could not help but look at Suyu again and said in surprise, "What you just used should be the Eagle Clan's first generation's secret technique, right? However, why is it even more powerful than the Eagle Clan's secret technique?" She had been fortunate enough to exchange blows with the recently extinct Eagle Clan Saint Clan, and she had experienced their secret techniques. However, those secret techniques weren't as powerful as Suyu's. Without saying a word, Suyu drew another trajectory. Ying's pupils shrank, and she hurriedly placed the full moon scimitar in front of her chest to block Suyu's mysterious attack. Clang! Crack! With a crisp sound, the top-notch Nirvana artifact, the full moon scimitar, was broken into two pieces starting from the middle. "Ah!" Ying screamed. The scar not only tore the full moon scimitar apart, but also split her chest open. Fresh blood spurted out from her chest. Just one move had caused Ying to be seriously injured. Her pretty eyes were filled with intense fear, and without saying a word, she turned and fled. Suyu followed behind her unhurriedly, and raised his finger to draw another stroke. This time, he cut off her right arm. Then, with another stroke, he drew a bloody wound on her back that was so deep that the bone could be seen. Accompanied by a rain of blood and shrill screams, the two of them chased after each other, leaving behind a long bloody path. "Lord Gai Tianma, there is an extremely strong enemy, save me." Ying hurriedly sent out a message. As long as Gai Tianma received the message, he would be able to arrive in a few breaths' time. Once Gai Tianma arrived, Suyu would be nothing to her. However, to Ying's despair, Suyu grabbed the air and pulled the wave of the message back into his palm. Then, he put his palms together and twisted them gently, completely shattering the wave. "You can't escape," Suyu said expressionlessly as he took a step forward. Ying's heart was pounding, and she had never felt such panic before. It was like when she was still a mortal, and she had encountered a hungry wolf that was hunting her down on the mountain. That sense of despair almost suffocated her. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that there were actually 3 communication signals just now. One of them was sent to Gai Tianma, but the other 2 were hidden under the wave of the message, and were secretly sent out without Suyu's detection. The target of the message was none other than her other 2 companions. If the 3 of them joined forces, there was a chance that they could compete with Suyu. Finally, after just a few breaths' time, her other 2 companions caught up with her in shock. They looked at Ying's severely injured body and couldn't help but be shocked. "Ying, who injured you like this?" In their memories, this was the first time that Ying had received such a serious injury. Ying couldn't care less about talking to them. She said, Quickly join forces to deal with that human. He is proficient in an ancestral technique." By now, Ying had already realized that what Suyu had used was definitely the legendary ancestral technique. Chapter 2942. Ancestral Techniques? The 2 ancient sages were shocked. There were very few forces that were proficient in ancestral technique. They had to be at least at the level of the Holy Clan. Furthermore, every Holy Clan treated ancestral techniques as a top secret. Only the great sages of each generation could cultivate them. The rest of the clan members could not even touch them. The Skull Group had been collecting ancestral techniques from the abandoned civilizations for almost an entire era, but the ancestral techniques they had collected were all in a blurry state. How could they be like Suyu, who had such a complete set of ancestral techniques? Even for the holy clans of the 9-star civilizations, unless they were great sages, the ordinary clansmen could not cultivate ancestral technique. "Who are you?" the 3 of them asked as they gathered together. If Suyu was some powerful descendant of the Holy Clan, then they would be in deep trouble. Suyu calmly said, "Naturally, I am here to exterminate the Skull Group." With a swipe of his finger, another Eagle Clan ancestral technique swept over. The 3 of them had grave expressions. Ying was even more terrified, but with her two companions by her side, she was much calmer. She had already lost her full moon scimitar, so she could only rely on the domain she had cultivated. As for the other two, they each took out their own Tao artifact. One of them had a Tao artifact that was filled with absolute killing intent, while the other's was filled with extreme coldness. With the three of them working together, the three forces resisted Su Yu's Eagle Clan ancestral technique. In the end, all three of their domains and Tao artifacts were forced back. Even so, the three of them were forced back, their bodies trembling. Among them, Ying's injuries were the heaviest, and she vomited blood on the spot. The other three were stronger than her, but their bodies were in intense pain. With just one move, Su Yu had suppressed the three of them with his own strength. "Not good," quickly informed the Lord, "we are not his match." The three of them were shocked. No matter how strong an ancient sage was, the three of them could easily kill him if they worked together. But Su Yu's strength was too strange, too strong. "Let's go." The three of them immediately headed toward the place where Gai Tianmo was cultivating. Su Yu calmly said, "You think you can come and go as you please?" He performed hand seals with both hands, shooting out 10 seals in a row. This was the Heavenly Spider Clan's ancestral technique, heaven-binding imprisoning net. As soon as they were unleashed, the 10 seals weaved together to form a massive net that enshrouded the three fleeing ancient sages. What? Another ancestral method? The three of them turned pale with fright. Feeling a strong threat to their lives, the three of them no longer hesitated. They immediately crushed the jade and sent a message to Gai Tianmo, who was in seclusion, asking him to help. However, as soon as the news spread out, it was intercepted by the ancestral technique of the heavenly spider race. This net could not only block the body, but it could also completely isolate all kinds of obscure energy. "Accept your fate." Su Yu closed his eyes and weaved signs again. A fiery red mark gathered in his palm. The ancestral technique of the fiery phoenix tribe. The three of them gasped. Up until now, Su Yu had displayed 3 ancestral techniques in succession. How was this possible? Someone who hadn't even reached the great sage level had mastered 3 ancestral skills. There had never been such a heaven-defying genius in the 9-star civilization. As soon as the mark appeared, the entire sky was illuminated in a fiery red. The 3 people's despairing faces were illuminated with a dark red light in the secret area. Gai Tianmo was absorbing the last trace of the mark. While collecting, he could not help but frown slightly. Ing hasn't come back yet? According to his estimation, Ing should have succeeded in killing the mysterious strong man by now. However, why hasn't he replied yet? Crack! Suddenly, something in his bosom shattered. Because it appeared too suddenly, he was caught off guard. The mark in his hand that was about to be successfully extracted immediately dissipated. Gai Tianmo was a little incredulous. He took out 3 life cards from his arms, each of which was engraved with a name. Among them, the life card with the word Ing was broken into pieces, and a trace of blood flowed from the cracks. Ing is dead? How is that possible? Gai Tianmo was shocked. According to his estimation, Ing was more than enough to deal with the mysterious strong man. How could she be dead? His face quickly turned cold, and his face was full of murderous intent. He shouted, "Arrogant! Arrogant! Bring me his head!" Unexpectedly, as soon as his voice fell, there were 2 consecutive cracking sounds. Looking down, the other 2 life cards were both broken. Who? Gai Tianmo stood up abruptly, his face filled with deep shock. Ying's cultivation was the lowest among the 3 of them. However, Ao and Kuang were much stronger than Ing. However, the 2 of them had been destroyed one after another. One could imagine how powerful the person who attacked was. The person who attacked was definitely not the mysterious strong man. There must be another expert, or even a great sage who was not inferior to him. Gai Tianmo squinted his eyes. "You ruined the plans of my skull team. Let me see how many lives you have." His figure flashed, and he instantly broke out of the secret area and stood in the void. "Come here, accept your death," Gai Tian Mo roared. But before his roar had died down, a voice came from behind him. "Is it very painful? Why didn't you have a shred of mercy when you slaughtered billions of lives?" Gai Tian Mo suddenly turned his head and saw a calm, silver-haired young man looking at him indifferently. "Who are you?" Gai Tian Mo's eyes suddenly became sharp, as if he had seen through Su Yu in an instant. Then his gaze shifted away, and he looked around vigilantly. "Who else? Come out." The youth in front of him only had the cultivation of a middle-stage Heaven Law Master, and he did not have the ability to kill Ing and the other two. He must have had the help of another expert. Su Yu stood in front of him with his hands clasped behind his back, and said expressionlessly, "If you are referring to the person who killed your 3 guards, then I can answer you." "It's you?" Gai Tian Mo looked at Su Yu again, his eyes full of disbelief. "You? Tell me, where is that person hiding?" As he spoke, he flicked his hand, and a wisp of the terrifying power of a great sage suddenly swept over. Su Yu stood where he was, not moving an inch. He just opened his mouth and let out a breath, and the airflow turned into a mark that circled in front of him. Although Gai Tian Mo's strength was powerful, this was just a casual attack, not even a 10,000th of his true strength. Therefore, the mark easily dissolved it. Ancestral technique? Gai Tian Mo was shocked. He finally looked at Su Yu and said seriously, "Who are you?" Only a great sage of the Saint clan could master such a complete ancestral technique. But what was Su Yu's cultivation level? How did he master the ancestral technique? The person who wants your life. Su Yu performed several ancestral techniques in a row. Gai Tian Mo's pupils shrank when he saw this. How could a person master several ancestral techniques? "Are you a student of the Saint Thief?" Gai Tian Mo was surprised. If there was anyone in the world who could master multiple ancestral techniques, it was only the Saint Thief. The Saint Thief was the most special great sage of the 9-star civilization. He never stole the belongings of the living, only the dead. Chapter 2943. Therefore, Holy Pirate dug out many lost ancestral techniques from the ancient tombs of the extinct sacred clan. For example, the ancestral technique of the Eagle clan that Su Yu had just performed was one of the techniques unearthed by the divine pirate. Therefore, when he saw Su Yu perform several ancestral techniques in succession, he immediately thought that Su Yu was the descendant of the holy pirate. Seeing the ancestral technique attack, Gai Tian Mo was not afraid at all. In the end, Su Yu's cultivation was still too shallow. Even though he had mastered the ancestral techniques, their power was still very limited. He had merely condensed a vortex in front of him, and he had successfully crushed all the ancestral technique. After the initial shock, Gai Tianma could finally confirm that it was indeed Su Yu who had killed Mia Ing and the other two. Such a powerful ancestral method was more than enough to kill them. His expression was gradually replaced by excitement. "Haha, you really came at the right time. I was just worried that I wouldn't be able to report on time, and now you've delivered yourself to my door." The remnant marks he had accumulated were far from meeting the requirements. There were still at least half of them left. However, Su Yu's body had countless remnant scars, and if he was killed, he could extract the ancestral technique from his body and complete the task easily. In his heart, Su Yu was simply a gift that had been delivered to his doorstep. That depends on how capable you are. Su Yu stopped using the remnant marks. In the face of a great saint, an ordinary remnant mark attack would not cause any harm at all. Gai Tian Mo laughed, and the demonic aura around him vibrated. He said, "Descendant of Saint Thief, hand over your life." He had to be wary of other great saints' descendants, but Saint Pirate was a great saint with no one to rely on and only knew how to collect the belongings of the dead. What was there to be afraid of? Demon sun devours the sky. The demon chi around covering Heaven Demon turned into a huge demon dragon, roaring and pouncing. Inside the demon dragon's body, one hand after another reached out. As long as one touched it, they would be grabbed by the demon dragon and then pulled in, becoming a prisoner of the demon dragon. Then, the heaven-covering demon would extract all of their power. Suyu was expressionless. He raised his hand and waved, and a delicate long sword fell into his palm. That was the absolute heaven sword he had obtained. The sword was still in its sheath, but even so, it still emitted a piercingly cold aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. As the demonic dragon approached, Suyu swung his sword. A piercingly cold sword energy seeped through the scabbard and overflowed to the outside world. The giant demonic dragon was immediately split into two, and each of them brushed past Suyu. The remaining sword chi did not lose its momentum and slashed toward Gai Tianmo. The latter narrowed his eyes and retreated while displaying his domain to resist. Rumble. Finally, with a muffled sound, the domain was broken, but the sword chi was also weakened. Without waiting for Gai Tianmo to heave a sigh of relief, the sky above his head darkened. Suyu leaped up with the absolute heaven sword in his hand and chopped down from above. With this slash, more sword chi burst out from it and slashed straight at Gai Tianmo. The latter's eyelids twitched. What sword was that? It was already so terrifying without being unsheathed. If it was unsheathed, wouldn't it be able to destroy the world? However, Gai Tian Demon was not afraid. He raised his hand and took out a Dao weapon that looked like a stone puppet and placed it above his head. Clang, the absolute heaven sword slashed on the Dao artifact, creating a long spark. Immediately after, the Dao artifact began to break from the middle. What? Gai Tianmo was taken aback. That Dao tool was a peerless defensive Dao tool. It could withstand the attack of a great sage peak without being damaged at all. However, Suyu had sliced it into two with a casual strike of his sword. The long sword shattered the Dao tool and slashed toward the top of his head. How could Gai Tianmo dare to be careless? Without hesitation, he took out the jade bottle that he had painstakingly collected and opened it. All the seals inside flew out and turned into a cloud-like shield above his head. 1,000 ancestral techniques, go! Gai Tianmo shouted softly. A series of runes immediately began to fluctuate erratically before abruptly erupting with dazzling light. Suyu and the sword were blasted thousands of miles away. His bones seemed to be falling apart, and his body shook violently. A mouthful of blood could not help but gush out of his throat. The remnant seals that Gai Tianmo had mastered were all relatively weak ancestral techniques, but they could not withstand Gai Tianmo's superb strength. He could casually activate them with great power that could not be resisted. In the end, the difference in cultivation between the two sides was too great, and there was no way for him to face it head-on. Gai Tianmo was unforgiving, and he came over with the remnant seals. Looking at the terrible long sword in Suyu's hand, he said with lingering fear, "Hand over that sword, and I will spare your life." His heart was filled with greed. That sword was too terrifying. Suyu was only a junior at the middle stage of the Heavenly Law Master, but he could hold his own against him with that sword. If it fell into his hands, wouldn't its power be even more shocking? Suyu stood up and held the red hilt of the sword. He said coldly, "If you want the sword, can I?" He took a deep breath, held the hilt, and slowly pulled out the sword. He had not been willing to pull out the sword before because the absolute heaven sword was too difficult to control. Every time he used it, he would use up most of his strength. Therefore, he had been very careful when using it. Now, it seemed that he had to use it. Moreover, there were no more innocent creatures in the entire Blackwater civilization. Almost all of them had been killed by them. Later, when the sword caused a massacre, it would only kill the heartless creatures of the Skull Unit. He would not feel any psychological burden. Clang! The absolute heaven sword was slowly pulled out of the sheath. When it was pulled out an inch, the world began to shake. The entire Blackwater civilization seemed to be overwhelmed, and it swayed unceasingly. The blood-red seawater formed huge waves, which drowned the earth and the mountains. The members of the Skull Unit all flew up into the sky in panic, and they looked at the sudden change in the world in shock. Some of the members with powerful cultivations looked in the direction of the Absolute Heaven Sword with trembling hearts. They instinctively felt that there was an extremely terrifying aura coming from there. It was as if the weapon of extinction was descending upon the world. Guy Tianma was about to approach, but the moment the sword was pulled out of the sheath, he could not help but be alarmed. He hurriedly shouted, "Stop!" His instincts told him that once the sword was pulled out of the sheath, it would kill him easily. Su Yu turned a deaf ear and said coldly, "Don't you want this sword? Why, you don't want it anymore." He continued to exert force in his palm, pulling out the Absolute Heaven Sword bit by bit. It was not that he did not want to quickly pull out the sword to kill Guy Tianma. It was that the sword spirit of the Absolute Heaven Sword was resisting him, and was unwilling to come out of the sheath. Guy Tianma's brows began to twitch violently, and a life-and-death crisis that he had never felt before shrouded his heart. After weighing the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth, and actually abandoned the Absolute Heaven Sword in front of him, and flew into the sky to escape. "You want to leave?" Su Yu wanted to kill Guy Tianma the most. If this person was not killed, there would be a second Skull Unit. The space domain was displayed, and Su Yu immediately chased after him, although the distance between them was rapidly increasing. But with the terror of the Absolute Heaven Sword, he was still within range of being killed. Clang! Finally, the Absolute Heaven Sword was pulled out, and with the help of the great sage of the Feng clan and old demon Shui, he barely managed to stabilize the Absolute Heaven Sword. He raised the Absolute Heaven Sword and pointed it at Guy Tianma. The latter's heart was beating wildly, and he shouted angrily, "Surnamed Su, do you really want to fight to the death?" Su Yu shook his head. "You are wrong. The fish will die, but the net will not break." Chapter 2944. Guy Tianma's heart was beating wildly, and a sense of impending death enveloped his heart. He had experienced countless life-and-death crises in his life, but none of them left such a deep impression. Even the last time, when he was almost annihilated by many ancient sages from the abandoned civilization, he felt far less threatened than this time. He had a hunch that if this sword were to fall, he would be killed and sent into the ultimate ruins, and there would be no possibility of survival. "Human, we have no enmity in the past, and there is no hatred between us. How about this?" Guy Tianma said. "To tell you the truth, behind me is the 9-star civilization, a huge force beyond your imagination. If I die, not only will you not get any benefits, but you will also suffer a disaster." After careful consideration, Su Yu killing Guy Tianma would only bring harm and no benefit. Moreover, he had not caused any substantial harm to Su Yu. In essence, the hatred between the two sides had not intensified. There was really no need for the two sides to become enemies. However, that being said, what Guy Tianma thought was another matter. Su Yu held the Absolute Heaven Sword in his hand, which was the reason why Guy Tianma could not let him go. As long as he was given a chance to live this time, he would do everything possible to snatch Su Yu's sword back. Unfortunately, Su Yu was not a young boy, but a person who had experienced countless battles and witnessed countless intrigues. He could see through Guy Tianma's thoughts better than anyone else. "Isn't it too late to say this now?" Su Yu said lightly, raising the Absolute Heaven Sword in his hand without any hesitation. With just a slash from a distance, Guy Tianma could be slashed into dust. However, at this moment, a woman's figure rushed over and stood in front of Guy Tianma. The woman was none other than Xiao Yan, who had a deep hatred for Su Yu. She was not alone, and there was another person in her hand. Xing Yuanxin. Xing Yuanxin's strength was sealed, and she could not move. She could only let Xiao Yan capture her. Xiao Yan said mockingly, "Come on, cut him off. If you don't want to see your old lover die, then do it as soon as possible." There was a hint of viciousness in her smile. Knowing that Xing Yuanxin and Su Yu might know each other, she searched Xing Yuanxin's soul, and unexpectedly found out that the two turned out to be fellow countrymen Su Yu met shortly after he first entered the martial path. Furthermore, their relationship was extremely harmonious, and there was even a hint of affection between them. From her memories, Xiao Yan knew that Su Yu was a person who valued relationships and was willing to dig out his own heart for his daughter. Such a person's weakness was simply too fatal. As expected, Su Yu's pupils constricted, and he slowly lowered the absolute heaven sword that he had raised. The smile on his face cracked, and he was even happier. It was indeed so. When Gai Tianmo saw this, he felt relieved. He was pleasantly surprised. He didn't expect that the mad dog, Xiao Yan, could actually bring him a chance to turn the situation around. Well done. Gai Tianmo praised and immediately came to Xiao Yan's side to help him capture Xing Yuanxin. Right now, Xing Yuanxin was his life-saving talisman. He could not afford to lose her. Su Yu, retreat now or you won't want to know the consequences, Gai Tianmo threatened. Xiao Yan immediately added, also, if you want her to live, put down the sword in your hand. Then, kneel on the ground and kowtow to me in repentance. Otherwise, I will cut her into 1,000 pieces in front of you and let her have a taste of all the punishments in the world. Xiao Yan was already familiar with torture. She knew better than anyone how to make a beautiful woman completely radiant from body to heart. Gai Tianmo hesitated for a moment, then allowed Xiao Yan to continue. If Su Yu was a person who valued relationships and loyalty, he might not only be able to keep his life, but he could also get that terrible sword. As long as he got that sword, what was Su Yu? He could be destroyed with a flick of a finger. Su Yu stood where he was, unmoved, as if he was hesitating. Xiao Yan's face was ferocious. She grabbed Xing Yuanxin's neck and said with a grim smile, "Why don't you do as I say and kneel down immediately?" She was sure that Su Yu would do as she said. Once he knelt down and put down the absolute heaven sword, then Su Yu's fate would be in her hands. She must let Su Yu have a taste of living hell, and let him understand that what he did to her that day was the most regrettable thing in his life. However, Su Yu still did not make a move. After pondering for a long time, he sighed softly. There's no other way. Xiao Yan grinned. It seemed that Su Yu had given in. Gai Tianmo could not help but feel excited. He stared at Su Yu's palm, waiting for the moment when the absolute heaven sword fell. But unexpectedly, Su Yu did not let go of the absolute heaven sword. Instead, he held the absolute heaven sword and swept it towards them. What? Their faces changed dramatically. Xiao Yan's maniacal smile froze on her face. Her mind went blank as she felt the sword energy slashing towards her. In Xing Yuanxin's soul-searching, Su Yu was obviously a person who valued relationships and loyalty to the extreme. It was absolutely impossible for him to watch Xing Yuanxin die. But why did he not give in, and even publicly kill Xing Yuanxin? Suddenly, Xiao Yan remembered something. It was an inadvertent interlude during the soul-searching process. She directly ignored it and did not take it to heart. But now that she thought about it, she shuddered. She looked down at Xing Yuanxin again, and the corners of the latter's mouth gently curled into a smile. It was a smile of success. You tricked me! Xiao Yan finally realized and screamed sharply. From the beginning, Xing Yuanxin exposed her relationship with Su Yu openly and secretly. It was a trap designed by Xing Yuanxin. This was because Xing Yuanxin cultivated the realm of 6 paths and had 6 clones. When one died, another body would immediately replace it. Unless all 6 clones were destroyed at the same time, Xing Yuanxin could not be killed. Su Yu's sword could at most kill one of her clones, and then she would resurrect on the spot. Except for suffering a little pain before death, there was essentially no loss. It was precisely because she knew this that Xing Yuanxin deliberately exposed her relationship with Su Yu and lured Xiao Yan to use her as a hostage in front of Su Yu. Su Yu also knew about the existence of Xing Yuanxin's realm of 6 paths, so he must know what to do, kill Xiao Yan as well. Otherwise, Xiao Yan, this insidious woman, would hide again when she saw that the situation was not good, and it would not be easy to find her again. And by the time she hibernated long enough, it would be too late to stir up trouble and harm living creatures. Xiao Yan, who understood this, was furious. She raised her hand and slapped Xing Yuanxin's head, venting the resentment of being tricked. However, before she slapped down, the destructive sword of the Absolute Heaven Sword had already arrived. In an instant, both Xiao Yan and Xing Yuanxin disappeared in the sword light. The latter maintained a smile on her face, quietly watching Su Yu in the distance, waiting for death and rebirth. The sword light flashed, and the two were annihilated in the light. Gai Tianma, on the other hand, had long seen that the situation was not good and fled far away. He cursed in his heart, "I actually believed that stupid bitch." Originally, he had fled far away, but in the end, he believed Xiao Yan and returned. Chapter 29:45. At the critical moment of life and death, Gai Tianmo roared and turned into boundless demonic energy, fleeing in all directions. As he fled, he shouted, "Surnamed Su, I'm a member of a super sacred clan. My status is high. If you kill me, a great calamity will befall you." Super saint race? Su Yu did not take it seriously. The famed Sword Sacred Clan was ranked 3rd among the sacred clans. They could be considered a super sacred clan, right? But so what? Didn't he still die in his hands? Furthermore, he did not believe that any super saint clan would dare to admit that they were involved with the skull unit that was filled with crimes. "Don't worry, no one will come to take revenge for you," Su Yu said calmly. However, Gai Tianma obviously couldn't hear this sentence. This was because the sword light had already rushed over and destroyed all the devil chi. The screams of Gai Tianmo came from all directions. He turned into thousands of devil chi, and none of them managed to escape. "Humans! Even if I die, don't think you'll have it easy either." Before he died, Gai Tianmo let out a resentful cry, "My Gai Tian clan is not so easy to kill." His voice drifted in the 9 heavens, then converged into a black demonic eye, which swooped down towards Su Yu. Su Yu's expression changed slightly, and he immediately dodged. However, once the demonic eye fixed its eyes on Su Yu, he couldn't get rid of it no matter what. No matter what level of space domain Su Yu used, the demonic eye followed him like a shadow, and the distance between them didn't increase at all. In the end, the demonic eye hit Su Yu's shoulder, causing him to feel a burning pain. Su Yu rolled up his sleeves to take a look, only to see that a vivid black demonic eye had appeared on his arm. The demonic eye did not harm the body, but it constantly released fluctuations to the outside world. Su Yu tried to isolate it with the ripples, but it was extremely difficult. The ripples were very special, and no matter how strong his power was, he couldn't seal them completely. There would always be a faint ripple that would leak out. "Gai Tian clan?" Su Yu murmured. There was no need to examine this signal carefully to know that it was sent to the so-called Heaven-Covering clan. It meant that Gai Tianma had died at the hands of Su Yu, and he was using this as an excuse to draw his people to seek revenge. "It seems like it will be slightly troublesome," Su Yu said calmly. Before officially stepping into a 9-star civilization, he had already formed a grudge with the so-called Super Saint race. However, if the Cauldron he led wanted to occupy a seat among the 9-star civilizations, he could not avoid friction with the forces inside. "It seems like I need to gather more power before I can set foot in a 9-star civilization," Su Yu mused. Shaking his head, he returned to the place where he had just killed Gai Tianmo and stared at the place where Xing Yuanxin had died. However, even after waiting for a long time, Xing Yuanxin still hadn't regained her form. He couldn't help but feel nervous. Could it be that I was wrong? Su Yu looked around carefully, but there was still no sign of the saint primordial spirit condensing nearby. Oh no! Did an accident really happen? His heart skipped a beat and he immediately panicked. However, at this moment, someone patted his shoulder lightly. Suyu turned his head abruptly and saw a tranquil face with a faint smile. "You seem to be worried about me," Xing Yuanxin said with a faint smile. Suyu could finally relax. He glared at her and said reproachfully, "You scared me!" For a moment, Suyu was really scared, and he felt an indescribable sense of panic. He was afraid that his sword was too powerful, and that Xing Yuanxin wouldn't even have the chance to replace the Six Paths body. "It won't happen again." Xing Yuanxin stuck out her tongue and said apologetically. This made Suyu feel embarrassed, and his gaze softened again. "I'm sorry for making you suffer." The feeling of death was not pleasant. The sword had struck Xing Yuanxin's body, and the pain was so intense that Suyu, who had died multiple times, could feel it. No, I have implicated you. It's all my fault for being too weak." Xing Yuanxin sighed. Hearing this, Suyu took out half of the primordial energy without hesitation. "Go into seclusion immediately after returning." Xing Yuanxin only smiled slightly and accepted the primordial energy. She was not moved by the value of the gift. Her eyes were filled with tenderness, and she looked at Suyu more than she looked at the gift. "All right, I'll listen to you." Xing Yuanxin smiled gently. After the two of them looked at each other and smiled, Suyu opened the Nightmare Crossing Lotus seat. "You should go in and cultivate. I need to deal with the remaining members of the Skull Team." Xing Yuanxin had never liked fighting and killing. Hearing this, she nodded and entered the Nightmare Crossing Lotus seat obediently. Suyu surveyed the entire Blackwater civilization. With the death of Gai Tianma, all the members of the Skull Team had scattered like birds and beasts, fleeing far away in panic. He was expressionless as he held the Absolute Heaven sword in his hand and stabbed it into the ground of the Blackwater civilization. The Absolute Heaven sword was a peerless and ferocious sword that could even kill a great saint with a single strike. How could a deserted star like the Blackwater civilization withstand it? In an instant, the entire Blackwater civilization, with the Absolute Heaven sword as the center, crumbled in all directions. The members of the Skull Team who had yet to flee were killed in the blink of an eye. As for the living creatures who had fled into the starry sky, they still could not escape from this calamity. This was because there was still a sinful woman above them. Creak! A giant black lotus flashed across the sky, and a rain of blood started to fall. Suyu soared into the sky and began to exterminate the remaining members of the Skull Team. However, there were too many of them, and it was impossible for the two of them to kill all of them. Suyu's eyes darkened. He raised his hand and grasped. The 8 prime-level domains gathered in his palm and formed an 8-colored radiance. With Suyu as the center, the radiance quickly radiated in all directions. In an instant, it passed through the many members of the Skull Team and formed a giant 8-colored radiance above their heads. The radiance also condensed into 5 words: Skull Team member. Suyu and the sinful woman met up. The latter had an apologetic look on her face. "I'm sorry, Suyu. I did not follow your instructions and kept all of them." Suyu shook his head. Not keeping all of them might not be a bad thing. He took out a great seal. As soon as the seal appeared, the sinful lady almost cried out in shock. She blinked her eyes in astonishment and disbelief. "Don't tell me that you brought back the seal of the main hall of the Temple of Heaven?" As one of the members of the Heavenly Law Palace's sub-palace in the past, the sinful woman had no reason not to recognize the Great Seal of the Heavenly Law Palace. Suyu smiled faintly. "Then tell me what this is." The sinful woman covered her mouth and sucked in a breath of cold air. How did you do it?" Even if Suyu's abilities were very powerful, the Heavenly Law Palace's main palace was filled with experts. It was said that there were generations of palace masters. It would be extremely difficult to snatch the Great Seal of the main palace from them. "The palace master gave it to me," Suyu said vaguely. Without waiting for the sinful woman to ask in detail, Suyu activated his energy into the Great Seal. the great seal of the heavenly law palace continued to vibrate.